Gentlemen, my apologies for being a few minutes late. We were interviewing some candidates to fill an open position on the board, and it took a little longer, but my apologies. So I will call the meeting to order of the Merrimack Planning Board for Tuesday, March 6th. Let me remind everyone who will address the board to make sure you sign in on the clipboard, make sure the microphones turn on, and speak clearly into them. By way of announcement, our next planning board meeting will be March 20th at 7 p.m. in this room. Let's see. Nelson, 1, 2, 3, 4. Nelson, will put you appointed to a voting position for the spot that Desiree normally occupies, and Dan will put you in for Mike Redding's spot. So everybody's a voting member tonight. And with that, that brings us to the Planning and Zoning Administrator's report. Robert?
The only thing that we have is just to recommend that the Strife LLC project is not of regional impact.
Okay. So what's the will of the board with respect to the staff's recommendation on the regional impact for Strife?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we accept staff recommendation that this particular project has no regional impact.
Is there a second for Alistair's motion? Second by Councillor Koenig. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? So we are 6 tonight, 6-0-0, to uphold the staff's recommendation. Robert, is there anything else?
No, sir.
Anything by members of the board for staff today? No questions? Okay. Next item on our agenda is Strife LLC as the applicant and owner. Review for acceptance and consideration of final approval for a site plan to construct 47 elderly housing units. The parcel is located at 412 Daniel Webster Highway in the R4 residential and C2 commercial aquifer conservation and elderly housing overlay districts, tax map 5D 4 lot 1. Robert, is there anything that we need to know before we hear from the applicant?
The only thing I want to just make note is that we had left in front of you a copy of a waiver request that was caught after the fact. So it's just a scale waiver.
Okay.
You to sign on.
Okay, that's Starbucks. All right. With that, please introduce yourself and tell us about the project.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board.
I'm not sure your microphone's either not on or not close enough to you.
Okay. Is that better?
Yes. Nope.
There we go.
There
Looked
you
like
go.
it was on.
No, you got it.
For the record, my name is Patrick Colburn, and I'm a project manager with the firm Keach Nordstrom Associates. Our offices are in Bedford, New Hampshire. To my left, I have Brent Cole, also a project manager with our office, and behind me, Connor Biot, who represents the applicant. We're here tonight to discuss the development of property at 412 Daniel Webster Highway. It's map 5D4 lot 1, and we're just to the west side of Daniel Webster Highway with frontage along East Chamberlain Road. Historically, you may have known this land as being owned by the power company and is vacant today, other than a series of utility easements that are enjoyed both by Eversource and by the town for sewer access. There's a sewer main that bifurcates through the property. There are two properties here that were sold by Eversource to this same applicant. Only one of those properties is subject of tonight's case, and that is Lot 1, as I mentioned. It's 14.4 acres in area and located primarily in the residential zone. There's a small piece of the property fronting on East Chamberlain that is in the C2 commercial district. We're also located partially within the wetland zoning district. We have frontage on the Sauhegan River, and partially within the flood hazard district, the shoreline protection district, and the aquifer protection district. Most importantly, the property is entirely within the elderly overlay due to its proximity to the center of town. You folks, I'm sure, are familiar with that elderly overlay district, which affords up to 8 dwelling units per actual acre, or for our 14.5 acres, 115 units worth of density. To the north, we are abutted by the Merrimack Village Mall, where the DW Diner is, and then Rite Aid just beyond there, and then single family and multifamily to the south and west, along with the Sauhegan River, as I mentioned. So now let's talk the proposal for Overlook Estates. We'll make sure that this is on. Okay, that working?
It is.
So the proposal for Overlook Estates here is in front of you this evening, and this is a 55 and older community. There are 47 units proposed, and you can see those here. They're in a mix of triplexes. There are 3 triplex buildings, a handful of duplexes, and then also 2 single-family units. These are for sale units. They're not rentals. And so this is a condominium proposal. As you can see here, what we're proposing to do is come in off of East Chamberlain Road near the crest in the hill with the proposed Abenaki Circle. It's a private, to-be private, dead-end cul-de-sac street with 2 side streets off of it. Canoe Lane is this guy here providing access to 2 triplexes, and then Birch Bark Court is this little eyebrow street here providing access to 3 duplexes along with the community clubhouse and community mail station. The site is served by municipal sewer and MVD water. Those come from East Chamberlain Road, and as part of this project, the site design incorporates sidewalks throughout the development that connect out to a proposed sidewalk along East Chamberlain Road that connects down to the existing sidewalk network right there in front of the mall along DW Highway. As far as drainage is concerned, the proposed roads all have curbing and closed drainage. That directs stormwater to a central stormwater pond underneath the power lines. So to orient you here, this is Daniel Webster, this is East Chamberlain Road, and these are the Eversource easements. There are 2 of them that overlap. There's a low spot in there today that essentially acts as a pond. It collects the majority of the surface water from the property, and so what we've done with our design is utilizing the sandy soil beneath there, reconfigured that pond to suit the needs of the development, directing all of the closed drainage to that area, and infiltrating to recharge the groundwater table. Let's see. On site, obviously, we have the requisite landscaping and landscape buffers as they pertain to commercial abutters, residential abutters, multifamily residential abutters. Site lighting is fairly limited. What we tried to do is provide pole-mounted residential-style pole light fixtures at the intersections, over the parking lot at the clubhouse area, at the end of the road near the cul-de-sac. Off-site, we have significant improvement proposed. When we met early on with Kyle Fox, DPW director, we understood the primary concern being the horizontal and vertical alignments of East Chamberlain Road. Today, if you drive out there and you're heading southbound on DW, a slight right turn brings you to East Chamberlain Road and right into about a 12% up gradient. What we attempted to do here with direction from DPW and support is to work with the existing right-of-way, but try and make more of a T-type intersection at where East Chamberlain meets DW, and then work really with that vertical alignment in order to create a platform at the intersection. And that's exactly what we've done. You'll see in the plan set that there are some off-site improvement plans that are actually the subject of that waiver request that Robert mentioned, and I'll get to that in just a second. What we're doing here is, as I say, rebuilding all of East Chamberlain along the applicant's frontage. And so it'll be 24 feet in width, where it's less than that today. It will have the sidewalk that I mentioned along the westerly side. At the intersection, we've turned it as much as possible, such that you now need to make a true right turn onto East Chamberlain instead of just that slight right, and then a left turn to head up the street. We hope that will help there as well. And then, as I say, a level platform, so that as you come down East Chamberlain from point south, you have a level platform before coming to the stop sign, stop control at DW Highway. As part of that effort, because that requires a significant amount of cut, we are proposing to replace all of the sewer and water utilities until we catch back up to existing grade here. So new sewer and new water to provide adequate cover over the new vertical alignment of the road. At the same time, we propose to tie into the gas main that is under DW but not under East Chamberlain today and extend gas utility to Abenaki Circle, and making a tremendous improvement there to what exists today. The other thing to mention is that the steep part is 12% today. With the revised vertical alignment, we've got that down to 10%, which we believe to be about the best we can do with the area that we've got to work in here. We had a meeting yesterday with town staff, and it seems, I think it's fair to say that everybody is in favor of the improvement as proposed here, and so with few modifications within the site, we think we've got a project here that everybody can be happy with. The one waiver request that I mentioned is of plan scale. Sheets S1 through S3 in this set are the off-site improvement plans for East Chamberlain. We've got an existing conditions plan and removals plan, and then a grading and drainage utility plan and a site and a roadway layout plan. Those were prepared at 40 scale, and the profile was prepared with a horizontal of 40 and a vertical of 4. The regulations stipulate that those plans be prepared at 50 scale. So in essence, we exceed the standard. But a waiver is required because the regulations don't allow for anything but a 50 scale plan. So exceeding the standard still requires a waiver. That's the one waiver that we were asked to submit by the town engineer. As far as state permits are concerned, this project will be reviewed and requires approval from the DES Alteration of Terrain Program, the Shoreline Protection Program, the Wastewater Engineering Bureau for our sewer connection, and so we've to date only submitted our Alteration of Terrain permit, still need to submit the shoreline permit and the sewer connection permit. Have not received comments back from the state. We are also coordinating with the Souhegan River Local Advisory Committee, and we have a meeting scheduled next Thursday night with those folks to present the project and get any comments they may have. Here at the local level, we submitted to CLD, the town's review consultant, but as of this evening have not received their comments. So we understand that this is sort of an introduction to the project, and that you folks will be interested to see what the consultant has to say before moving much further. Let's see. Check my notes here and make sure I'm not missing anything. Got anything for me, Brent? Okay, the one other thing I wanted to mention is regarding traffic. I expected and had invited our traffic consultant, Rebecca Brown from GPI, but she called me earlier this morning. She and both of her kids have strep throat, and so I told her to stay home. If there are questions regarding traffic, Brent and I will take good notes, and we'll make sure that when we come back to see you, that she's with us and prepared to answer those questions. So with that said, Brent and I and Connor will be happy to try and answer any questions you have. Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation. So the first order of business for the planning board on this is to determine whether the application is complete and susceptible to review. Does the board have any questions as it relates to that? If not, is there a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we accept that this plan is complete, and therefore we can spend time considering it.
Is there a second for Alistair's motion? Nelson has a second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? So 6-0-0 to determine the application's complete. So I do have some comments and questions about your presentation and some more now that we've accepted it for review. The sidewalk connection that you have along East Chamberlain Road, that I assume is going to be at 10% as well?
Yes.
Because anything steeper than 10% isn't going to be suitable under the ADA, or anybody with a wheelchair and handicap or mobility limitations won't navigate a road grade that's more than 10%.
So an accessible route for ADA is actually only 5%, but they do acknowledge that in existing situations like this, you're limited to your accommodations. There's just no way to prepare a revised East Chamberlain Road alignment that accommodates 5%.
Yeah.
Throughout the development, however, we have done that.
So does the neighborhood up East Chamberlain Road have any other outlet to DW Highway, or is this their only outlet?
No, it does have a secondary outlet. Oak Street connects East Chamberlain to Columbia Circle, and Columbia Circle comes down to DW.
Okay, so during construction, you intend to completely close off the end of East Chamberlain Road?
Yes, we'll have to. Yep.
So everybody from the neighborhood has to go the other way?
During the reconstruction of East Chamberlain Road only, yes.
How long would that take?
We have not discussed with a site contractor what that timing looks like. There was talk of it occurring during the school recess so that school buses aren't affected. So, we'd be looking at an end of June to end of August timeframe to complete that work. If you look at the roadway profile, there's a significant amount of excavation in order to take the 12% grade that comes right down to DW today and create a 3% platform that then sags into a 10% up gradient. And so that, coupled with new sewer, water, and gas, there's a fair amount of work to be done to improve that stretch of road.
Okay. Understood. So in the best of circumstances, we're talking about the couple of summer months. And if it takes any longer than that, as quickly as you can get it done.
That's right, yeah. So at this early stage, the applicant hasn't even discussed this with a site contractor. So timing of the improvement is just what we discussed with staff yesterday, which was to try and work it around school bus impacts.
Okay. Are you talking about this summer?
That was the thought, perhaps for East Chamberlain Road and getting that done. But it depends on how this permitting process goes. So we, not only with you folks, but with the state and others involved, there's a duration of time here. And so depending on how that pairs with the applicant's current workload will depend on whether or not they get out here this summer.
I think a permitting process is part of that, but also all the contractors that you're going to need to do this are filling their schedule for the summer.
Absolutely, agreed.
The short little, not really dead end, but little stub roads that you have, one's Canoe Lane, is that what it is?
Yes, sir.
And the other one is kind of the extension of, I guess, Abenaki after the roundabout, where you go around to the two single residences.
Yeah.
Have you consulted with the fire department and DPW with respect to road widths and access and turnarounds and hammerheads and all that fun?
Yeah, we certainly have. So let's start with Canoe Lane. Yesterday when we met with staff, the fire marshal has requested that this is 245 feet long. And so based on that length, the fire marshal has requested a apparatus turnaround for Canoe Lane. And so what Brent and I have already started to sort of schematically design is between units 44 and 45, spreading these out a bit more to accommodate a turnaround. A fire truck turnaround, hammerhead style, is actually 70 feet long from this edge of pavement to the edge of the turnaround. So it takes up a fair amount of real estate. And so that would in essence eliminate the hammerhead that we've provided at the end and move a turnaround to Canoe Lane. I have not reviewed that with Mr. Manueli, so that's just our initial thought for accommodating the request. Down here, this is not a road, not a named road. This is a driveway to just 2 units. So typically anything 3 or more requires a name and is called a private way. This is nothing more than a driveway providing access to 22 and 23, but also access to the gravel sewer road that exists out there today. And what we learned yesterday, we had not considered previously, is that the fire department is asking that the sewer access become a secondary fire apparatus access. So in essence, it's gated, it's right here in this location today, gated, connects the parking lot at DW Diner to that sewer access road. We need to redesign and rebuild that to accommodate fire apparatus.
Okay.
We have not done that yet either.
Okay. So within your condominium development, are there fire hydrants and other
Yes, sir.
accesses to water? Where are those going to be located?
So that is shown on the utility plans. Let's see. Which are sheet 8. Starts at East Chamberlain. So our proposal had a hydrant proposed at the corner of the north corner of East Chamberlain and Abenaki Circle, and then a second one. Let's see. Down here at the end of Main,
Okay.
the end of the cul-de-sac. When the water department reviewed this, they asked that a third one be installed between units 35 and 36 on the north side of Abenaki.
The water department did?
Yes, sir.
Why?
It's the spacing of the hydrants was such that their standards required a third
Okay.
linear foot spacing.
Outside of your development, where's the closest hydrant now today?
Let's see. I did a street view drive-by, but I'm not sure it shows on this plan. So East Chamberlain at DW is right here, and there's a hydrant across the street. And then on East Chamberlain, the water department tested one at number 29, but that's further down the road. I believe I saw one, and maybe the neighbors know better than I believe I saw one in front of these single-family homes here.
Okay.
I couldn't tell you the linear distance, but I saw a yellow hydrant when I did a street view.
Okay. So one of the thoughts that I had, smaller condominium developments with the number of units at 47 or even something smaller than that have to depend on those 47 people's condo fees to cover the maintenance cost, and you got a lot of road to plow here. What are you projecting that your condo fees are going to be in a condo like this? What's it going to take to maintain it?
I just asked the applicant, and he does not know,
Okay.
nor do I.
So, understanding that we'll probably be hearing about this application more in future meetings, research that a little bit and figure out a sense of what your maintenance costs are.
That's fair.
Because you've got over 1,000 feet of road that have to be plowed, and obviously when you do the singles and the doubles and the triples spaced out, there's landscaping and mowing and a lot of, up to the doors shoveling and all in a condo configuration. And the only concern that I have is to make sure that the project is viable, that you don't have something that's priced out of the market where the condo won't go as a over 55 development, and then you're back here saying we want to do something else. So take a look into that one and remember to tell me about it in one of the future meetings. Do other members of the board have comments or questions? Nelson?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. First of all, could you show us, you mentioned that there are 2 parcels of property here. Are they consolidated, or I didn't see the property lines?
So, sorry. The 2 parcels that I talked about are Lot 99 is this triangular shaped piece with frontage on DW and on East Chamberlain. And then the second is Lot 1, which is the 14.4 acres, the subject of this application. Nothing is proposed on Lot 99. That just came with the deal.
Yeah.
Everything is proposed on the westerly side of East Chamberlain Road.
It does give you a little wiggle room on designing the new Chamberlain Road.
Oh,
right?
we're using it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I see.
yes, we are. Yeah.
Okay.
The only piece of this that incorporates Lot 99 is right-of-way dedication to the town, so that you have a full 50-foot width,
Yeah.
and then slope easements because the grading of the new East Chamberlain creeps right over the line onto that lot.
Yeah.
Does it help you configure the DW intersection to be more of a T?
Not substantially. It's because of if you see the grade change out there, so the intersection is near where it sits today. But you can see that the intersection is, the right-of-way is rounded onto Lot 99,
Okay.
whereas today that's not the case. So we are bringing drainage down and around that corner
Okay.
over in the new right-of-way area.
Does the applicant have any relationship with the condo development to the west?
Pennacook?
I don't know what it's called.
This condo development here?
Yes.
No relation.
Okay. The reason for asking is there's some walking trails, at least on the plans for that development, that lead to the bridge over the Sauhegan and under the turnpike. And I was wondering whether there could be any interconnection with yours and theirs, but that depends on their willingness to play nice. Although I suspect there's some public right-of-way for that bridge and all of that as well. Nelson, more questions?
Okay, you stole one of mine, but that's good.
Yeah, you gave it to me yesterday.
Yeah, so, yeah, I appreciate what you've done with making a sidewalk down to Route 3. That helps a lot. I think it'll be a walking distance to shopping and that sort of thing for the people living in there, and it's a good amenity to have. So I appreciate you doing that. Connecting to the bridge on the Sauhegan would also be a good amenity, and not take too much if you can connect into that road on the adjacent lot. But again, you'd have to explore that, I think, with the abutters. The width of the road, Zabanaki and so on, are they full 24-foot?
Yes, they are.
They are, town standards, okay. And the only other thing I wanted to mention was I'd like to see some consideration for landscaping improvements at Route 3 on this lot. Right now, if you look at that, there's the power line, of course, comes right through there. And at the surface, below the power line is scrub oak and brush and that sort of thing. And I think some improvements could be made in that area. In reviewing your landscaping plan, I had some difficulty identifying which shrubs were which, and maybe you can help us out a little bit with understanding that. There's circles of various sizes, and I think it's page 8?
12 and
12.
13 now.
12, thank you. And 11. 12, yes. I don't know how to identify those circles as to what,
Okay, I
Sort
can
of.
certainly help you.
yeah, okay.
So if you pick any one of them, like, let's start on sheet 12 and go to unit 47, which is the last on the left off of Canoe Lane.
Let's see, 47, yes,
Okay.
gotcha.
You see a large circle representing
Yeah.
a tree there. And
Yeah.
see the line coming out of the circle labeled 1OV?
Yes, I do.
Now go to the bottom of that page into the plant list table and find your OV is an American hornbeam. Not sure what that is as an engineer, not a
Okay.
landscape architect, but I'm assuming it's a deciduous tree of some sort.
Okay, Okay,
And so
I-
you'll see all of those, like, in that same area, you'll see 4AC, you'll see 7TP.
Yeah.
You take those
Okay.
symbols down to the plant list.
okay. Okay, thank you.
No
I
problem.
guess my other comment still stands. I'd like to see something under the power line there at the Route 3 to sort of make it more attractive,
Okay.
if you can
We can
think about it.
consider that.
Yeah.
Obviously, have to run that through Eversource like we do everything else here.
Yes, I realize it would be
yeah.
limited height kind of plantings.
Yeah.
And
We'll make a note of that and
But,
see what we can do.
the scrub oak that are there will grow into real oaks if you let them, so.
Yeah.
Okay,
Thank you, Nelson.
okay.
Other members of the board have comments or questions? Dan?
Hey, could you talk a little bit about how you envision the parking in this? I'm assuming you're not parking on the street. You're gonna. So each duplex has 2 spots. Is that the size of those?
Yes.
Okay. No garages or anything, just
No,
straight.
they're all garage spaces.
Okay.
This is your,
Gotcha. Yeah, that.
your duplex unit right here.
Gotcha. That helps.
And you can see garage.
Let me remind you to use the microphone.
This is your duplex unit here in elevation.
Gotcha.
And you can see the garage with the unit to either side.
Okay.
And so the duplexes have shared driveways because the garages are meeting in the middle, whereas the singles obviously don't. But then the triplexes have 3 driveways where the garage is on the same side of all 3 of the units.
Okay. Yeah, that makes more sense. Thank you.
Other comments or questions by members of the board?
So just to expand upon that, excuse me, it's a single-car garage with a single-car parking space in front of the garage?
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah, so the regulations require 1.5 spaces per dwelling unit. And in short, we've provided 2 plus the visitor spaces that are near the clubhouse.
so can you talk about your visitor spaces as far as how many units you've got here and how many visitors you can have at any given time?
I was just looking to see if it was, so there are 8 clubhouse spaces proposed, and that is the extent of the additional parking beyond the garage and the driveway per unit.
There's 47 units and you can have 8 guests show up at the facilities?
That we have, as I say, we have 8 sort of spare parking spaces. That's assuming that you don't make arrangements beforehand with your neighbor or what have you for use of additional driveway space. So that's a
That
loaded
ain't gonna
question.
happen, so, I mean, this is pitch 5 and over. You've got grandparents that are going to be there, and their kids and grandkids are going to come and visit and stuff like that. They need a place to park as well, right? So they're either parking on the street or they're walking some distance from the clubhouse.
So I'm not sure. I mean, we have 102 spaces where 71 are required by code. What's a comfortable number?
But you can't put 1.5 in a unit, right? But you've got each of these individualized units with their garages and their driveway spaces. You're going to have to deal with that. And so chances are good that the company's not going to want to be parking in the neighbor's driveway, blocking them from getting to their garage, or blocking them from getting out of their garage or something like that. So I realize there's a requirement for 1.5 units, and I don't know where we come up with that number, but we also need to be practical and understand how we're going to deal with the company that's going to show up. And if they're going to be parking on the street, that's going to be something we need to figure out how to deal with. Because they're going to park somewhere, and if,
So are you suggesting we find place for more parking? Is that what
Yeah,
you'd like
that's
to
it.
see?
So the regulations, the table that we have has a formula for, this is probably multifamily developments, and that's probably where the calculation comes from. But the regulation also allows the board to take a look at whether there's other reasons or other reasons for requirement. In this case, you've got essentially all but 8 spaces are assigned to a specific unit. They're not generally available. So if I'm visiting somebody at 47 and I can't use one of the spaces at 47, there really aren't any other choices available. So it doesn't work in the way that a normal development would work, where there's 102 spaces and go have at one. Well, I can't access the next guy's garage and go into it. So that's the reason to sprinkle around a few, and not a huge number, but in a couple of spots along through the development, so that you don't have people walking hundreds of feet, because they won't walk hundreds of feet. They'll just park on the road. But a relatively reasonable walking distance from the units, have 2 or 3 here, 2 or 3 there, that kind of a thing.
Sure. I think we can find space for that. We were looking at it as already exceeding that number. And, but yes, we can absolutely investigate more. Is there a minimum that are you looking for, a half a space per unit sprinkled throughout or something, so that I don't come back with too few?
I'm not sure that I have a specific number in mind because I wasn't thinking about it until Tom mentioned it, but
I'll see what I
it's,
can do, and we'll go
yeah.
from there.
I mean, it is strange that your formula produces that number because I think that you'll have plenty of driveways in front of houses with nobody in it, but that doesn't necessarily invite me to go park in the neighbor's driveway to go visit three
I
houses
understand.
down.
I understand.
So, I think probably if you were doing, in my mind, little clusters of 2 or 3 spaces, in maybe 3 or 4 locations total.
Okay.
I don't know. Does anybody else have anything in mind to try to give them any specifics?
That's a tough one, but that's the kind of thing that would help a lot. Just,
Yeah. Thank you, Tom, for noticing that. I don't have any more.
Wait, a couple more.
Dan?
Is there a sidewalk on Canoe Lane?
No, there isn't.
Okay. Any plans to add one?
We didn't propose a sidewalk there, given that it only serves the 6 units.
Okay. I mean, I think if you're going in conjunction with what Tom was saying, and you're gonna, seems like, between 41 and 42, you could put a couple spots right there. You may want to consider it if people are parking between 41 and 42 to walk to 47 down Canoe Lane. You might be able to, something to think about.
Yeah. No, we'll
Okay.
find a spot for it. Yeah.
I also was curious, this may be a little too far in advance, but I'm assuming you're gonna build all the roads and utilities and get all that done first. Are you planning on building all 47 at once and selling, or selling and then building?
Honestly, I don't know. Connor, can you speak to that? Or is it's going to depend on what the market can bear?
Okay, I was just curious, because I mean, if I had my choice, I'd pick 23 if I was the first one, versus maybe like 35 if I was later on in the game. I was just curious if we're gonna have 47 units built,
Yeah.
unsold, waiting for people to buy them, or if they're just purchased individually then built.
I don't think that is, the fiscally responsible way to approach this. Actually, it was a comment that maybe planning staff or other made about preparing some kind of phasing program, or at least, drafting a development agreement such that you can get occupancy permits on a per each basis based on improvements done to date, or something to that effect. And so we do need to address that comment.
And one more final thing. Are all the condos gonna be the same, or do you have like 3 or 4 different styles?
So other than the triplex versus duplex versus single, they all, in
They're all-
essence, look the same.
Okay.
So
Interior layout.
Okay.
So there's your triplex model right there. As you
Gotcha.
can see, looks very much the same. Inside, I'm sure there'll be add-ons and extras, as there are in any development, where you can, Brent has shown on the plan accommodations out back for either a deck or a patio. And then inside, the
Floor
usual.
plan is the same?
Floor plan is the same, best of my
Patrick, can you do me a
knowledge.
favor? Switch off one of the microphones or move them apart from each other. They're
This
feeding
one's
back.
off.
One of them's feeding back on the other when you were talking. So,
Okay. No, that's all I got. Thanks. I was just curious. Thank you.
any other comments or questions?
well, I was curious about, and you mentioned the driveway off the end of the circle, because I was having a hard time understanding how that was the end of your road. That ends up being just a driveway consideration for those 2 houses? What width is that? Is that,
You got 20 feet on a plan.
20
okay,
feet wide.
and you're thinking, or you're talking to extend that gravel drive or something to make it passable by, fire trucks?
That's right. The fire department stipulates a minimum 16-foot width. And that can be gravel, but it has to be maintained year-round. Obviously, the paved drive to access the 2 units.
So that's going to be part of the
Condominium
applicant's
fees? Or-
obligation to plow all of that
Yeah, at the fire department's request.
and going to condo fees. When it comes to phasing plan, I think the staff has made clear, and I think Dan was hinting at, we generally are open to considering phasing plans, but the thing to consider in doing that is that the primary infrastructure, most of the road work, utilities, and certainly the clubhouse have to be a part of the beginning. You don't sort of build 47 condos and then say phase 48 is the clubhouse,
I can appreciate that, certainly.
because it'll never happen. So, other comments or questions? Give us a chance to take some public testimony and let the public weigh in. Certainly. Are there any abutters or interested citizens who'd like to give the board some information on this proposal? Mike, come on. Now, Mike, you also have submitted a letter, but I assume you'll speak to that. So do you want the letter and your comment, or?
No, that's okay. Thanks a lot. Mike Malzone, 80 Chamberlain Road. I did drop a letter off to the chairman of the board to ask to table this evening. And it's not to stop the project. It's just that I thought it was a little deceptive putting 412 Daniel Webster Highway down on the planning board notice when the whole project's on East Chamberlain Road. There was a lot of people that did get notified, but I think a lot of other people would have went to the meeting if they knew it was going to affect their lives on East Chamberlain Road. So I want to state that for the record. I was before the town council a couple of weeks ago with my displeasure about the notifications from the planning and zoning board in this town. So again, I'll state that for the record. My couple of questions was on, could you put up the actual picture again for us, if you would, please?
That one or the?
Yeah, excellent. The colored one. It looks good on TV at home. East Chamberlain Road. I'm at this location.
You got to keep a microphone with you, Mike,
take
or
the
they
mic.
can't hear you.
Sorry about that.
And Mike,
Yeah, I'm at this location right here, and my first
I think he turned it off, Mike.
Click.
is
Click it on. Sorry to be such a.
no, that's fine. I'm not good with the microphones. I live right here, across the street from the opening of this. My first question is the grade that's coming up to that entranceway to come on to East Chamberlain Road, because there is an incline, and if there is an incline coming up that road, that means all, when you got 150 cars coming in here, I'll have all those lights coming right into my house all night long, because I'm right across the street. It's not going this way, it seems to be turning that way. So that was my first question. The second question is, we got a big snowstorm coming up tomorrow, and I'd like you all to take a ride up East Chamberlain Road and give that road a shot. He's only taken 2 degrees off that, which really isn't much. And, you know, forget the sidewalks, because no old timers, with all due respect, are gonna be walking down that hill, whether it's nice weather or not. The inconvenience that the people of that road are gonna have to deal with is something that should be taken into consideration. You're gonna ask the residents now to not go up and down their street for a certain amount of time and have to go out the back way. I think it's quite inconsiderate. And seeing that it is 412 Daniel Webster Highway, why don't we just go in from the bottom of the street and go up on the side? You could still put the condos up on the top and everything else and leave the road as it is. But seeing that we are gonna talk about road improvements, during the wintertime, even at 10%, the people aren't gonna be able to go up and down that highway, up and down that road during a snowstorm. It's still gonna be too steep, you all know that, that's a fact. So everyone's gonna have to go out the back way. Now, if we could get the fire department and the police department and the plow driver to all come up here, they will all tell you 2 cars cannot go down East Chamberlain Road during the wintertime side by side. It's impossible. It's an illegal width road. You're gonna throw another 150 cars up there, which is cool with me. I don't have a problem with that. But then we should widen East Chamberlain Road all the ways up so people can get out Oak Street. Because Oak Street's legal, and the back one, which I believe is Buttonwood, is legal width. Those are 2 legal width roads. East Chamberlain isn't even close. You're short about 8 feet at a minimum. So those problems should be addressed, because the winter is undeniable. Everybody knows that in this town what that road is like. So I don't think just trying to cut and widen that and drop it 2 degrees is gonna be sufficient enough. And my last thing is, there's not even 20 houses on all of East Chamberlain Road. Do we think 47 might be too much for that area? Covering all the ground space so that you're not replenishing the water table in the town. Couple questions just to ask. And I think that's it for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Any other abutters or citizens wish to weigh in? Going once? Of course you can. Just introduce yourself and sign in, get settled in, and then tell us what's on your mind.
My name is Erin Narrow. I live at 409 DW. We just bought a house right there at the bottom of the hill of East Chamberlain. I have to agree with him. During every snowstorm since we bought the house, I have moved the recliner, and I've watched people take a run at East Chamberlain. That is a scary hill for plow drivers, not just the people that there are people that will pull their trailers and you just hear their engines revving. They are trying to get up that. So 10% I don't think is going to make much of a difference. I am also concerned about traffic flow and adding, like they said, 102 vehicles to the 47.
There's
Between
a more
them.
complicated answer than that, but yeah.
But so it just brings a question of traffic. I can sometimes sit in my driveway 4 or 5 minutes waiting to get a break. If someone comes out of Rite Aid, I'm lucky because then I just have to worry about the one side. Sometimes I have to pull out into the middle lane just to try to get out of my driveway. So I am concerned about traffic. And if they might add a light to the back entrance or change the intersection.
Traffic
at all.
light? No.
No.
Not
Okay.
for something like this. Not even 10 times this size wouldn't add a traffic light there. Well, maybe it would at 10 times.
I was just curious if they would be working on, with the amount of flow of traffic that will be added to that area, because it's pretty bad. At certain times, I think after 4 o'clock, between 4 and 5, you just sit on DW. You just sit and sit and sit and sit and sit and sit. So it's going to add a lot of traffic.
Well, it'll add, the number of cars that it adds. I think the applicant will get a chance to speak with this. My understanding from hearing from the staff is that this project was developed into a 55 and older development, and that was one of the reasons for considering it, is that there's an entirely different flow of traffic and traffic pattern for a over 55 development compared to a
But it's
ordinary
still,
development.
still adding on to what we already have, all that traffic that's already there. But that's all I had to say.
Thank you.
Is your driveway on DW Highway?
It is. It's right on DW.
Could you show us where it is, please?
Can you point?
Uh,
I don't know if it's on that plan, or maybe it is. All the way over on the right.
So this is the end. So my house is like right here.
Oh, okay.
My property line lines up right here. So I sit and stare out my window at East Chamberlain.
It's the house between the power lines and Custom
And-
Electric.
Correct. So,
Okay.
Yeah. so
Understand.
Thank you for that.
entertaining.
Okay.
Because you weren't at a microphone, I just mentioned that not only the description Lynn gave, but just south of the intersection on DW Highway. Any other abutters or citizens who wish to weigh in? Come on forward, sir.
Sure, thank you. Stephen Ragsdale. I actually live at Pinnacook on the Salhegan at the other end of the strip where they're going to build the new complex.
Can you point to it? I don't know where that is.
Sure.
Are you in the other condo complex?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, okay, then you don't need to point to it.
That's
I know
all
where
right.
that is.
Yeah, and one of my concerns is I do live right here.
Thank you for pointing, but you got to
Right
talk
there.
with a
I live on
microphone.
40.
Okay.
I live on 40 Pinnacook Terrace. And I see here in the plans, we are keeping a full buffer of trees between the complexes. Is that what I'm understanding completely? So we're not just looking out
Let me
into the...
let me make some notes, and we'll get the applicant to explain that a little bit better. It may not be what you think it is, so that's why I want to get them to explain it a little bit further.
Okay, perfect, because, that's really something we would like. We're a 27-unit complex over here. It's nice, it's quiet. We're on the river, so we kind of enjoy that privacy. So if there is, a way we can keep this buffer, that is perfect. The gentleman and the young lady already addressed the traffic, but when you're talking about this building, and there's only 8 extra parking spaces, I'm assuming I was listening right. So people will park on this street, not on Chamberlain, correct?
So we can certainly restrict the applicant to not invite parking on a public street, which is East Chamberlain. So I can say, no, there won't be any parking on East Chamberlain. I don't think anybody would want to because it's a really far walk to get to those houses.
Correct.
We can also have the applicant discuss whether there's parking on the internal streets, and we would not be supportive of seeing that happen either. That's why we would tell them to develop the extra spaces.
Okay, perfect.
We don't really like on-street parking much at all.
Only one other comment. I know there's, some time that's going to take for this construction, and East Chamberlain's going to be cut off. And they're suggesting we all go around the other direction. We have elderly folks here on the N unit that she has emergency care response on a regular basis. So I understand everyone's talking about school vacation. The school bus is the kids, but what about the fire department, the EMS that has to get to these units? Now we're taking extra time, and we don't really know. We really don't know how long this is going to take for construction.
No, that's true. The fire department is generally in tune with when roads are under construction in town, so that they know how to get to places, and they're pretty good at that. Reconstructing East Chamberlain Road for this project could just as easily happen because it's time to repave it or rebuild it. It's just a part of maintaining roads. This may happen out of the schedule when it might ordinarily happen, but it's not impossible for that road to be closed anytime.
Okay.
Repave the one in front of my house.
Those were the few suggestions that I wanted to put out. I appreciate it.
Thank you for that. Thank you for your testimony. Others? So before we close the public hearing, I think because of the state of the application and some of the things that we need to know for more information, there will be more nights, another time in the future, and there'll be a public hearing at each of those. So this isn't the only chance. If anybody feels like they want to say more, or they hear something a little later and they want to have a comment on it, there will be more chances. And with that, if there's, oh, Mike, sure, come on forward again.
Is there any way of requesting that on the further meetings that they put it as the East Chamberlain Road project, so the people of the neighborhood could actually go to it as opposed to running around to see where it is on Daniel Webster Highway, or do you need to leave that verbiage?
I don't know. I'll have to ask the staff what their opinion is. I know that the reason that it's mentioned is DW Highway because that's the legal address of record for the parcel. But I don't know if there's any ability to put anything in parentheses or something.
Okay. Because that is legit. You know what I mean?
I'm not quite as convinced as you are.
That's very deceiving. Very driving around Daniel Webster Highway looking to see where these are going, and you're like, oh no, they're going in front of your home.
Well, the abutters all get individualized notice of it, though. And this, if you're not abutting it, then you're not running around wondering where it is. And if you are abutting it,
right,
it's.
It would be nice for the other people on East Chamberlain Road to know that the road's going to be shut down. That's legit, Mr. Chairman.
But one thing to consider, and I want to make sure I mention it, and I don't mean to be too informal and call you Mike, and if I should be calling you Mr. Malzone, but if we table it or continue it to a future meeting, it will be to a date certain, and the notice that we expressed here tonight is the only notice. So other than publishing an agenda, and it'll be number 5 on the meeting next month, there's nothing else that gets mailed to abutters in the future.
Right, and that's why I'm saying, why can't it just say East Chamberlain Road so people can stay up on it? Especially the ones that weren't notified.
Yeah. If parenthetically on the agenda, there's absolutely no reason we couldn't add like East Chamberlain Road project or whatever. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's.
Yeah, I don't have any reason to be opposed to that.
Awesome. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Okay, come on forward.
Dave Thompson. I also live
Hang
in
on, Dave. You got to sit down and get to the microphone.
problem.
Folks at home can't hear you. I can hear you fine, but folks at home, if you're a foot away from a microphone, they get nothing.
Yeah, I'm Dave Thompson. I also live in the Pennacook Landing condos. I just wanted to bring up one quick thing.
Sure.
We have 27 units, and we also have 2 parking spaces, just like they're proposing right there, which meets the 1.5 they were talking about. But we also have somewhere around 18 additional parking spaces that are available for the unit owners, much more than the 8 that they're talking about, which takes up a good amount of room. But that's for 27 units. And I'll tell you right now, during busy holiday seasons, all of those spaces are taken up.
Okay.
So if you're thinking about having 8 spaces right there, and I know you've already talked about it, and you might need to add a few more.
Yep.
For 47 units, that's a significant amount of parking spaces that are going to be required there. We're not talking 4 more parking spaces. We're talking 30 more parking spaces.
Right. Thank you for the input. It's good to know what your experience has been living nearby and on holiday times. This is always a tough one for the board because there's a tug of war between making sure you got enough spaces and not paving the whole world.
Yeah.
Leaving some area where the rain can infiltrate into the ground and a little bit of landscaping and that sort of thing. So it's always tension for us to figure out what the right amount is. Thank you for that. Other abutters or citizens who wish to weigh in? Okay. If there are none, then we'll close the public hearing. There's quite a few things bits of information that we need to develop from peer review and some other bits that could get ironed out. Let's talk about what we need to do between now and whenever we would hear it again. You guys can come back forward.
Mr. Chairman, could I make a motion that they have asked for one waiver, and as it is something sort of, it relates to how the plans are drawn, I think we might sort of give them the understanding tonight that we are going to accept the plans as they've drawn them and not go and stand on our dignity and insist on the 50-1 instead of 40-1.
Okay, so a motion to grant the waiver to request the plans may be drawn at a 40-1 scale. Is there a second for Alistair's motion? Second by Lynn. I agree with that. I think it makes perfect sense. And I do agree that you're exceeding the standard. I don't know why we've got kind of funny wording that says you're not allowed to do that.
Can we talk about why the waiver's being granted?
On the basis that, yes, I'll tell you in a minute, that strict conformity would prove unnecessary hardship, and the
Spirit and intent.
It meets the spirit and intent of the regulations. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Robert. If there's no other discussion, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? 6-0-0 to grant you the waiver for that. I want to give you a chance to respond to anything that you heard from the public in terms of their comments on things. Is there anything that you heard that you want to weigh in on?
I guess I want to clarify the reconstruction of East Chamberlain. That is not by choice. That is by request of staff that has identified a problem and is seeking resolution to a problem. This development creates a way for the town to improve an existing issue that they have had and have fought over the years, and that is East Chamberlain along the applicant's frontage. Believe me, the applicant doesn't desire to spend an additional $500,000 to improve a road that is already there, and that his traffic consultant has told him is safe to accommodate the proposed development. It has the ability to accommodate adequate site distance. It's a Class 5 public road, and all the rest. So the improvements here are not by the applicant's choice as much as they are in order to advance this project. I hope that makes sense. And so the accusations of being inconsiderate and so forth, the improvements are substantial, and you can't make a 10-foot cut in an existing grade of one lane of the road, leaving the other lane open. And because there is a secondary means of access to the development, what we've talked to staff about is a short-term closure to allow the fastest construction possible within the right-of-way. So I did want to mention that.
Could I just comment that I wish your traffic engineer had been here to actually say that, because having driven a school bus up that street, I would shoot her down in flames. But anyway.
They're making it better. I mean, what?
I'm all for the improvement. But I mean, to say it was adequate would be.
Oh yeah.
I couldn't believe that.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you there, Alistair.
Let's see here. Other than that, the concerns regarding traffic, I already told you that Rebecca would be here at the next meeting. And the only other one that I heard was regarding the buffer to Pennacook, and the buffer that is proposed as a result of the tree clearing required for the development is in accordance with the town's regulations.
Oh, that's right. So, and how much, not worried about what the regulations require, how many trees, how much depth of trees and distance is there now for that buffer? And
Well, the lot is aside. The lot is primarily wooded today, with the exception of the cleared easement.
Okay.
So the buffer that exists obviously can't remain. If you look at the landscape plan, as we get further in, that details the proposed buffer.
Page 13, I think.
And you can see a variety of evergreen plantings, shrubs, deciduous plantings, and so forth along the area remaining. So that is called out here as a Category A Type 2 buffer. I think somewhere she tells us even what that includes. It's so many plantings per linear foot, so many shrubs, so many evergreens, so many deciduous per running foot.
Okay.
Category A buffer is a minimum 10 feet in width, 1 ornamental tree and 3 shrubs per 25 linear feet. There's 321 feet there, which means 13 trees and 39 shrubs as a supplement to what's remaining for trees.
Okay. Thank you for explaining that, and that's kind of part of what I was getting at with the applicant, with the member of the public who was commenting on that it's a complicated answer to answer what the buffer means, because usually it depends on differing uses, and then there's a higher need for a buffer. But residential to residential, it's there. It's supposed to be screened, but it's not as substantial a buffer as 100 feet or something like that. Correct. Anything else that you heard from the public that you want to testify?
I heard mention both from the public and from you, Mr. Chairman, regarding groundwater recharge, and I just want to, I think I stated it during my presentation, but bring it back up that Brent's stormwater design on this particular project revolves around stormwater infiltration, because we are fortunate to have great sandy soils on this particular site. So all of the stormwater from impervious surfaces on the project is collected in catch basins and pipe and directed to an area that's designed to infiltrate it back into the groundwater table, treated. So it treats all of the pollutants and then infiltrates back into the groundwater table.
Thank you for that.
Yep.
Other comments or questions? Tom?
The setbacks that are drawn on here look like very narrow to the people that are along East Chamberlain and whatnot, and wide. The building setbacks, Robert, can you help me understand why they're different in widths?
I have to pull out, give me a minute, I'll pull out the elderly regulation.
Yeah. Is that what he's telling you?
Yeah, so if you're looking at sheet 1 of 28, the side setback in the lots, which goes behind all the homes, is much narrower than the roadway or the setback from the other condo. It wouldn't surprise me if we've got setbacks that have a 60-foot rear lot setback, because for some reason we do that in odd places here. And that may be why 15 on the side and 60 on the rear for some reason.
But
So there's a note here, housing developments for the elderly shall be exempt from the provisions of section 3.02. So that setbacks aren't really applicable.
What?
However, they are obliged by in this.
We do. Yeah.
We meet
Yeah,
all of the applicable setbacks,
the
even though
yeah.
that note does exist.
Why do you show different size setbacks on the different sides?
There are, in your zoning ordinance,
Yeah.
there are setbacks by your zoning district. And in this particular district, you have a 50-foot front yard setback, you have a 60-foot rear yard setback, and you have 20-foot side yard setback requirements. So that's why it's listed that way. It's right from the zoning ordinance.
So you're saying your front yard is DW Highway, and your side yard is the back back of those houses that are on East Chamberlain?
So front yard would be along DW as well as along East Chamberlain, and then side and rear, from there. So the two sides run perpendicular into the front, and then the rear runs across the back.
The side where the other condominium complex is? I'm just trying to understand where your front and back are.
Okay, yeah. Let me approach the board here. So Pennacook is actually abuts our rear yard. So our front yard is along DW for this short stretch, not even drawn because it's fully within the Eversource easement. We can't build there anyways. In the commercial C2 zone, that front yard setback is 30 feet. So you see that piece as we drive along East Chamberlain in the commercial 2 zone, and then blows out to 50 feet once we're into the residential district. And so because that's your front, then your side is obviously here along the single-family homes and the multifamily that exists at the end. There's a 7-unit condo or apartment building there at the end, and then the rear being along and adjacent to Pennacook. That's your 60-foot setback.
Other comments or questions, Tom?
No, it just seems frustrating to get that much closer to the single-family residences that are on Chamberlain, but I understand what you're saying. Some of those buildings are pushed up pretty tight along that side there, and I don't know what your buffering is going to end up being. I get it, it's residential to residential, but this isn't residential like single-family residences that have been there a long time. This is a new, almost commercial kind of a development. So I'm just concerned about that buffering, if you will.
It is, and it's an added level of frustration because those houses along East Chamberlain, their exposure to this development is their rear setback, so they're required to give you 60 feet, and the development is only required to give 20 feet because it's, quote, their side, and that seems a little bit strange. But again, with the elderly housing overlay, all of this setback stuff is voluntary for these guys anyway. So, strange dynamic the way that's working out.
It is strange.
It is a strange dynamic. Other comments or questions? Okay, so what do we need to accomplish between now and the next time we come together, and how much time do we need? We're waiting on our. Okay, Tom, go ahead.
Could you expand a little bit more on what Mr. Malzone was concerned about with traffic coming out of the Abernathy Circle? What kind of grading or whatnot is going on there? I'm not sure I understand the angles that the cars are coming out. Are they coming down to East Chamberlain? Or are they coming up to East Chamberlain?
Okay, so the road, generally speaking, comes in off of East Chamberlain and slowly crests down and has a down gradient all the way to the cul-de-sac, generally speaking. As you approach, the regulations require that we approach for 100 feet with no greater than 2%, 3% grade. And so there's a 3% platform, if you will, that tapers down to 5% per the ADA, as we discussed earlier, keeping the inside grades ADA compliant. So if I approach the...
So in English...
So you're coming, you take a right onto Abernathy, you're on a flat platform that is no greater than 3% down for 100 feet into a crest curve that tapers to 5% through the rest of Abernathy.
Okay. And it's down all the way to
So
the
if you're
cul-de-sac.
coming from Abernathy, you're coming uphill toward East Chamberlain, and you're on a flat platform for 100 feet before you come to the stop sign.
Okay. And so their lights are going to be shining up as opposed to
So,
down coming out of Abernathy Drive?
Only for those looking to make a right on East Chamberlain, which in my estimation will be few. I would say that everything that the residents here are looking to get to would be easiest going, taking a left onto East Chamberlain.
Unless it's that snowy day where
Unless
you
it's
want
a
to go.
snowy day or something like, because it is a steep hill there. And
Yeah,
people need to
I'm
navigate
not
that.
suggesting that you won't have the occasional car turning right onto East Chamberlain. It is a Class 5 road. I just think that the traffic study details that the majority is going to head the other direction.
Is somebody reviewing that traffic study? I haven't seen anything or heard anything about it, so you've just kind of glossed over it and said there is one.
Yeah. Absolutely. So that's part of the, that's part of CLD, your town review consultants. Part of their review includes the traffic study. It is voluminous. This is it right here from GPI, and it details all of those percentages left and right and so forth.
Takes into account the slopes that are there and things of that nature?
Yes, sir.
as to- And weather conditions and all that good stuff that Mr. Malzone brought up?
Seasonal adjustments and, yes.
Do you have the traffic study in electronic format, and have you submitted it to the town in electronic format?
I can't remember if we did that or not. I'm sure I can get it in electronic format.
Get it in electronic format. I want to figure out how we get it posted so the public can get a shot at that without having to come down and try and copy a 300-page, whatever that is. Robert, what did we do with, for Executive Park to get it online? Did the applicant arrange for that, or did we do it on our town's website?
I believe they provided the electronic, and we put it on our website.
Okay, let's
The
do
other
that
stuff,
again.
their videos and whatnot, they posted themselves, but the traffic, I think we put up.
With a link.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, so let's do that again so the public can get a chance to look at a document like that. Okay, any other comments or questions? So we need to finish our CLD review and get those comments back. Robert, how long have they had the information? When will we expect that?
I don't remember when it was submitted, but I would imagine it would come in soon.
Should be.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. What else do we need to accomplish between now and another meeting, if anything? No comments by anyone? Okay, well, if all we're waiting on is CLD comments and they should come in soon, we could consider whether we would put it on our next agenda or whether we think we ought to push it out and do it the one after that. The one thing to consider is that right now our next agenda has nothing on it. And today, the end of business today was the deadline for submitting applications for our next agenda.
Can we skip a meeting?
So we could skip a meeting unless we put this on that next agenda.
Mr. Chairman,
But does this,
I was just going to suggest that in order to come back at the next meeting in April, that really requires that we resubmit plans in about 2 weeks, giving you 2 weeks to have those plans and re-review. We can't accomplish that in 2 weeks' time. So we need to address staff comments that we discussed already, as well as any forthcoming comments from CLD.
So you want to be further out than
I would prefer to the May agenda. if
the
possible.
first meeting in May?
That would be fine with us, I
Okay.
think, yeah.
Easy to do. The first meeting in May is
first, glorious first May Day?
May 1st. Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion, Mr. Chairman, we table this matter till the May the 1st at 7 p.m. in this room with no further notice to abutters, but we'll do our best to ensure that there's a lot more information on the town website.
Second for Alistair's motion? Second by Lynn Christensen. Any discussion? I want to make sure that Alistair's caution about additional information contains the indication that Mr. Malzone raised about indicating Chamberlain Road.
Yes.
In the description of whatever it is that shows up on an agenda. With that, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? 6-0-0. Thank you guys for the
Thank you,
presentation.
folks.
Okay, so that's this. I want to keep that.
Okay.
This.
That's all right.
What's that?
Yeah, I just want to make one more public comment to those people. If that was okay. You done?
Sorry.
Okay. Yeah, that's fine.
Is there something you want me to say? Maybe
Yeah, it was just, it wasn't personal about the listing. I didn't want these guys to think that.
Oh,
You know what I mean?
no, they're right there. Let me ask the folks that were attending to the last agenda item to move the conversations into the hall so that we could take up the next agenda item, please.
didn't have anything to say at the meeting.
I don't think that message got out.
Yeah. All right, let's resume our meeting with agenda item number 4. That is Merrimack Parcel A LLC as the applicant and owner. Continued review for consideration of final approval of a site plan application for 372,800 square feet of development, including retail, hotel, event center, restaurant, office, multifamily, residential uses and associated parking and drainage improvements in accordance with the Merrimack Park Place mixed-use conditional use permit. The parcel is located at 10 Premium Outlets Boulevard in the I-2 Industrial and Aquifer Conservation Districts and Wellhead Protection Area. Tax Map 3C, Lot 191-2. And the agenda item is continued from the January 2nd and January 16th Planning Board meetings. Robert, is there anything that we need to know before we hear from the applicant?
Nope.
Thank you for that. Thank you for the update.
Yeah, probably.
Gordon, you take as long as you need to get settled in, and then
Okay.
when you're ready,
I'm
introduce
just trying
yourself.
to get the audio-visual stuff worked out. And maybe, oh, I'm there. Okay, good. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. For the record, my name is Gordon Leedy, and I am a landscape architect and planner with VHB for the applicant. And with me tonight, as requested, is Robin Bauza, our director, actually our regional director now, but formerly our director of transportation services to answer any questions you might have about traffic. I guess before we get into that, we left the last meeting with a number of items that you sent us forth to examine, and we have looked at those, and I'd like to sort of go over very quickly the kind of easier ones so we can kind of get those out of the way, and then we can talk about some of the other issues.
Okay.
In no particular order of importance, we talked about reducing the footprint of irrigation, and on the plans, on the revised plans that we've submitted, we have added a note that says that the irrigation will be limited to the areas immediately adjacent to the buildings, and you know, I don't really see, and the rest of the landscaping will be, you know, drought tolerant and will do fine. But the intent is to not have a 20-acre intensively irrigated site, to limit that to something as reasonable as possible. We talked about lighting on the emergency access road, and actually that plan is not the right plan. This one is. We removed all of the lighting that was along. We had, I believe, 5 fixtures along the emergency access road. We removed all of those, and we have 2 lights, one here, to light that parking area. And then we have an additional light down here to light simply the intersection area where there might be some need for emergency access movements and so forth that we wanted to have lit. So that has been resolved. With respect to a potential gate on the easterly end of the driveway, what we're looking at is, we haven't completely resolved it yet, but what we're looking at is, instead of gating that doing some kind of treatment, like a raised sidewalk that goes across the roadway that would be mountable and accessible for emergency and service vehicles, but that wouldn't read like a driveway, rather than gating that. And it will have signage that says "Do not enter," as we were proposing before, but it's a little less intrusive than a gate. Gates, as we know from the gate that's out there, require regular attention and maintenance, and they don't always function 100% of the time as intended. So we would rather do something a little bit different, but recognize the fact that we want to keep people, affirmatively keep people out of there who don't belong there. We have reviewed the location of the existing monitoring wells, and there is a note on the plans that there are actually 4 wells on the site. We will be able to maintain access to each and every one of those throughout construction. So, so the intent is to, cap them with like a curb stop kind of material. If they're in pavement, if they're not in pavement, extend them to the appropriate grade and maintain them in place so that we can utilize the important baseline information that we've developed over the last, because those wells have been tested over the last probably 10 or close to 10 years now. We also have removed the dumpster from behind Building C where we had it before. We had a dumpster in here, and we're going to handle trash for the residential buildings internal to the buildings, so there will be no external dumpsters for the residential uses. There still are a few dumpster areas for the commercial uses, but those are well screened and well away from any neighbors. So that pretty much is the easy stuff. And so what I'd like to do is invite Robin to come up, and we can have a discussion about the roundabout. And let me get a plan up. And then we can also talk about pedestrian movements on I gotta go here. Okay. We can also talk about pedestrian movements on throughout the through the site. What page is that?
Very
All right. That one. So, there were some questions of, this is a little bit of a different orientation than the other plans we've been looking at. This is Industrial Drive out to the left, Premium Outlets Boulevard as you come in. This is the site drive to Merrimack Park Place, and this is the Premium Outlets Boulevard as it goes up the hill or down the hill, depending on which way you're traveling, toward the outlet mall. So, did you want to? Well, I'm not exactly sure what the question was, but Alistair, I understand you had some specific questions about the geometry and the layout of the roundabout.
Well, I mean, the first thing that came up, which was nothing to do with me, was that the Merrimack Police put forward in their first response the feeling that the roundabout coming in from Industrial Drive should in fact be three lane to allow a better flow of traffic around the roundabout. I think the point the captain was making was he thought it was volume of traffic. Well, I mean, I don't agree with that, but I agree with it on a totally different reason, and that I'm prepared to come and talk about it as and when. But I think we need to understand why you've designed the roundabout the way you have, and if necessary, I have produced the English how this would be handled across the pond. Now, you may think I'm being difficult, but I'm based this on one or two particular facts. The fundamental problem is that people locally have a great deal of difficulty with roundabouts, partly because they're not used to them, and partly because they're not familiar with them. But, I mean, where I've been last week, there were roundabouts with 3 lanes of traffic all abreast going round and round, and of course if you go to the centre of Paris, going round the Arc de Triomphe, it's about 8 lanes going around. But
Going around the wrong way, too.
Take a mic.
no, only in Britain they go the wrong way. And I make no apologies. I don't have a drafting machine. I don't know how to use CAD. It hadn't been invented when I was drawing.
I can't object to what you've done, but you got to turn it towards me. I can't see it. Push it forward and turn it this way. There you go.
Shift to the left.
Come out in front of the tape, the end of the counter too. There you go.
As you can see, I'm not very good at this.
Okay.
Now, my concern is trying to get people into the right lane to go in the right direction, bearing in mind that people want to go either to the mall or to the outlet, this new facility, and the same on the way down. And because people seem to think that funny little stalk coming out of the side of their steering column is an ornament and not used for giving directions, but there's going to be accidents. And I think, whereas the captain was worried about volume, I'm more worried about people having accidents there, because it's confusing what's going to happen. So if I was designing this, and I'm not a traffic engineer, I've just been driving around roundabouts before Robin was even thought of by her wonderful parents, I would like to see from Industrial Drive the road, and this is what the captain put in, 3 lanes, 2 lanes going straight up and a clear 3rd lane for going round into the new development. And I've just applied that process all the way round. And if you think I'm being stupid, go to Keene, where the Keene bypass has got roundabouts on. And that's basically what the traffic authorities, and I believe that's DOT, have actually applied. The Keene roundabouts all provide clear separation between those who are going round the roundabout and those who are trying to go past it. Now, you can knock it. You can say I'm overdoing it. But I'm concerned to count for the situations where people want to go different ways, and I still feel that at times of high pressure, and I'm thinking Good Black Friday and Thanksgiving times, it's going to be very difficult unless we put in this sort of segregation. Now, that's my design. You can knock it all you like, and I'm not a traffic engineer, but I believe that people coming in and going up the mall have got a clear line. Those going around have got a clear line. Similarly, coming down from the mall, if you're going to go into the unit, it's cleared. If you're going to go round, it's that way. And coming out of the unit and exiting, everything's clear. 3 ways, 3 lanes, phasing into 2 in each directions to make it easier for people to know where they're going and achieving what they want to go. It's only my ideas, but that's what I personally would like to see.
Thank you, Alistair. Please tell us about the roundabout design, the way that it is, and why it's set up the way that it is.
Okay, so the roundabout design that you're looking at here is designed by standards, design guideline standards, operational standards. What you're looking at here operates at levels of service B, I think we talked about last time, which are very, very good levels of service for those peak hours, keeping in mind that our forecast includes a build-out of the outlets up the mall, which have a second phase still yet to come. And we looked at the peak hours, both PM and Saturday. So I'm never an advocate of building more lanes than you need to facilitate the traffic flow, and that's what we've provided here, is what you need to facilitate good traffic flow. While I appreciate the artwork, that's not a roundabout, though. When you're doing straight shots of traffic, it's no longer a roundabout. You lose the whole purpose of the roundabout, which is to calm and slow traffic. If you want straight-through traffic to travel straight through Premium Outlets Boulevard, that's what you have out there today, that's also an acceptable design. You could leave it the intersection exactly the way it is today, and that can accommodate the site traffic as well with the build-out of Premium Outlets Boulevard. What we're trying to accomplish here is keeping in mind that this is a private roadway. This is a private site. So we want traffic to travel slow, and we want it to be controlled. And that was the thought behind putting in the hybrid roundabout here.
Thank you for that. I explain which way. Show me some of the choices on the directions of traffic flow and why the different approach angles are what they are, and some of the arrow labels on the street seem to be confusing to me. I think when you come down from the mall towards the traffic circle, there's actually at one point a left turn arrow painted on the road, and
That's if you wanted to, if you came out and you wanted to go back up, you could, that's your directional to turn back around.
that one's
that's the
confusing
lane
because
you
it
would be in.
suggests you would turn to where the fourth leg would be if you had a four-legged roundabout.
We can modify that lane marking if you'd like, but that's the way you would actually mark the roundabout, because out of that lane, you can either go left to go back up the hill, or you can go straight through.
Okay. So when you analyze the peak flow traffic, what do your numbers look like for what you think the peak flow will be up to the outlet mall?
I did not bring the study with me tonight, so I don't have those numbers with me.
Okay. Is it something that's been available in the past, Robert? Is that in our file somewhere?
This
With their
certificate,
analysis?
yeah, yeah.
Is it
So-
with
Is
you
it
tonight?
here? I don't believe it is. but-
Yeah, we submitted a package to CLD, and so after the last meeting, when you were asking for a review of the roundabout, back in 2016, we did a full analysis to support the CUP application.
Yeah.
So what we did in response to the request for CLD to take a look at the roundabout design, I pulled up that old analysis and report that we did, but what I did was an updated trip generation analysis of the site plan, because the site plan's changed since then, just to make sure it was generating the same amount of traffic. It's only 35 trips more than what we were looking at 2 years ago, so basically it's still a wash of what we were looking at originally, and submitted that to them. It's about 180 pages of analysis and text, so I'm not surprised that they're still taking a look at it, but there's a full analysis supporting the design that went up there.
And for what it's worth, the geometry of this roundabout is very, very similar to what is over on Fidelity's site in 2 locations. And it's not the same kind of traffic flow and characteristic as exists at the airport or at places where you may have 4 legs, for example, to a roundabout. I mean, that changes the dynamic quite a bit. So this is specifically designed for this kind of application, and I would venture to say that the peak hour traffic through the roundabouts over at Fidelity is similar, if only a little bit less than what would be the peak here. But it handles a tremendous amount of traffic over at Fidelity on a daily basis.
Other comments or questions? Lynn?
I've got a question on the lane. Right here, you've got one arrow that goes straight, then you've got this one that goes straight. It has a left arrow, which leads me to believe that somebody coming up here is going to say, do I turn here? I understand you're not supposed to, but that's what that says to me. Those two should both be straight. This is the one that says you're going to go around here.
Yeah, there actually is going to wind up being directional signage back here as well that shows the lane designations.
But the same thing occurs here. You've got a left arrow here, and I don't want people turning left there.
Those guidelines on how to stripe those are actually put out by the Federal Highway Administration.
I don't care. I'm just looking at it saying if I'm driving down this street
that need to stamp the plan,
and they say I'm going to turn left here, I don't want them turning left here. I want them to go straight. This left arrow I have no problem with. This one and that one I have a problem with. And I don't see this as being much different than what Alistair has done, except by adding a lane here and a lane here. Looks the same to me.
And again, we need to follow the professional standards in order for our engineers to be able to stamp the plans. That's why we can't just change things.
Well, you can. You can over-design a road and make it more robust than it needs to be. It's a private road. You can build whatever you choose to
You
build.
can, but with respect to lane markings and traffic control devices,
We can't.
it's pretty.
It's a liability.
It's pretty defined.
If you're worried about your liability, you certainly don't build that. That's nuts.
That
spaghetti is nuts.
I guess I'm really confused because it is working really well over at Fidelity in 2 locations.
No, I'm not concerned about the roundabout itself. I think your roundabout, the 2-lane one, not with any additional lanes. I spent some time between last meeting and this meeting, and I found a U.S. Department of Transportation guidebook on the capacities of roundabouts, and I know that a lot of things change based on the exact geometry of the approach angles and lane widths and all of that stuff. But the end of the story is that roundabouts are incredibly robust and handle massive volumes of traffic. So I'm not really concerned at all about the traffic design that you have. But the lane markings that Lynn's pointing out, I agree with 100%. You got spaghetti written on the ground, and if you try to follow that, you're going to have people that are pausing there instead of getting into the flow of traffic and moving the way that it's supposed to be, because they're going to look at that and go, I don't know what to do there.
Well, again, for what it's worth, those lane markings are similar, if not exactly the same, as the lane markings over at Fidelity.
Yeah. There's no lane markings that look like that when you go out to the airport.
That could be, but it's not the same kind. It's not the same roundabout.
Well, I mean, you use the same choices. I mean, you can go completely around. You can make a U-turn. You can take the third leg or the second leg.
I would respectfully disagree with you, though. I mean, if you pay attention to the signage, it may not be pavement markings, but I believe that the directional signage at the side of the road has exactly those markings on it.
I'm sorry, every time you throw back at this, that this is what you've got in Fidelity, it's just, to me, means absolutely nothing. Fidelity people are those who go in there every day, they know where they're going, they're totally clued up. You're talking about casual visitors coming in this site who want to go to the outlet mall. And to say that because that's the way you do it in Fidelity is the way you're going to do it here is absolutely, to me, a red flag. I'm saying, sorry, that doesn't buy anything for me. I'm much more happy going and looking at the Keene bypass. They don't put signs like that on the road in Keene. Or if they do, they've long since worn out. They don't put extra left turn lanes on the approach. They've actually filtered the traffic and made it obvious where it's got to go. This is not obvious. I think to keep throwing Fidelity, you're just saying to me, or at least I'm saying to you, no. Sorry.
Alistair, I second that 100%.
So I think what Alistair said about the people at Fidelity going in and out of there every day makes a lot of sense because they're used to it, and people at the mall aren't going to have gone through this 5 days a week. But that said, I think that's worthy of consideration. The balance to that, though, is that the volume that you're talking about going up here and what that roundabout can handle is enormously more than what you're going to see going up to the mall. And when you have a lot of excess capacity, there's the ability for somebody that's unfamiliar with it to take a little longer and figure it out. It works. I mean, a roundabout, I know that you're critical of us and you think we don't know how to do it, but I've got more faith in people than you do. There's roundabouts all over the place and we manage it, and they work well. The only thing that's confusing to me is the way that the lines are striped on the ground. Not the lines, the lanes are fine, the arrows pointing in funny directions. And I know that when you put them on a sign, you're actually, the sign that they shows the roundabout and the arrow goes up around the roundabout when I'm supposed to make a U-turn there. That thing on the ground doesn't look like that at all.
Can I suggest that maybe we wait to see what CLD's comments are? They traffic engineers as well, and they design these as well, so it might be best to wait and see what their comments are.
I think that their comments are going to be focused on the capacity of the roundabout, not where the lanes are striped. And frankly, I was always satisfied that the capacity was fine. So
I think they've been asked to comment on the design, though. That's my understanding, right?
That's my understanding too, Mr. Chairman. I thought we were going to have a report from CLD at this next discussion.
I think CLD hasn't had a chance to finish their discussion yet, but they will. But I think that their report is will this handle the capacity that you have going through it? Not, is this lane marker exactly what it ought to be?
They're also looking into the geometry of it. and
Technical
everything.
stuff.
Yep,
Okay, good.
They are.
Even better. Other comments or questions in discussion?
Mr. Chairman, I would agree that this looks like it has the capacity to handle the situation. It's got the same 2 lanes going up and down now that it had before. It's got the ability with the roundabout to get people turned into this new development and out of the new development. And I doubt that there's going to be a lot of people coming in here to do U-turns. The people from the mall can U-turn and go back up again, right up at the mall. And nobody coming out of Starbucks or any of those, the bank or any of that, is going to come down the building and the street and then head back up. That would be ridiculous because it's hard enough to get out of that area as it is. So it looks adequate to me and fine. I don't think I would mess with it. I certainly would agree that the markings on the street are confusing because nobody's going to notice that dot and think of that as the rotary, in my opinion. But the signage, I think, is going to take care of that. Nobody's going to pay attention to the street after a year when it's all worn off anyway.
Fair enough. Other comments or questions? Nelson, lean forward.
Well, I was just repeat, I guess, what I said, that I was waiting for the CLD comments on this. I was going to go with their recommendations as far as what we do here. If we're looking to make a final decision tonight, is that what you're looking to get out of this? I
don't have an agenda. It's what the applicant has.
Pardon?
I don't have an agenda. It's whatever the applicant's looking to get done. So.
We're willing to work with staff and with CLD to do the right thing. We're confident that this is very close to being the right thing. So, whatever CLD has to say, if it's something radically different than this, then, we can come back and talk to you. But I think we're just about there, frankly. I don't know whether, I haven't really talked with Robert and Tim about this in any great detail, but technically speaking, the roundabout is actually on Merrimack Premium Outlets property. So we may need to file an amended site plan for them at the end of the day anyway. So, any kind of comments or suggestions that the board wishes to take up, we could certainly incorporate into those plans.
So I think that's, I hadn't thought about that before, about there being an amendment to the MPO site plan and that being an opportunity to come back and take another look.
Tim was basically saying, when I spoke with him about it several months ago, was basically saying, that can certainly, come after the main site as a condition of approval. So, and we're perfectly fine with that.
Okay.
Okay.
So the reason that I was comfortable with the traffic volume when I was reading the DOT stuff, and I'm reluctant to start talking about kind of how they tested capacities because everything about the geometry of the thing affects it. But 2-lane roundabout that's properly designed, their numbers are like 2,400 cars per hour, which is like double what the peak flows were projected for the outlet mall back when it was approved. And so when you start to make adjustments to it and you say, well, it's a 3-legged roundabout instead of a 4-legged roundabout, does that help or does that hurt the traffic volume? All of the adjustments in that DOT manual were minor adjustments around that notion of something like 2,400 cars per hour. Is it 2,200 or 2,350 or something based on around that number? If you make changes to make the roads narrower or those kinds of things. But nothing in there gets a 2-lane roundabout to the point where you can't manage 1,000 or 1,200 cars per hour really, really, really easily. And so that's why I sort of felt like going through the exercise of saying, somebody do the math and tell me how many cars can fit this roundabout, didn't seem like an exercise worth doing anymore. But I'm only one opinion. When you've got something that's got that much excess robustness to it, it's almost like we're sort of going through an exercise for nothing. Could you come out with a determination and say, well, we know that it can manage 2,211 instead of 2,400? I don't know. What's the point? There are other things that I do want to talk about with the development other than the roundabout, but other than there being, confusing paint on the ground, I've been happy with the roundabout for a while.
Okay, so can we switch gears? And
Sure.
Talk about something else?
Yes. We got more hard ones?
Yeah, actually, I do. I've got a couple more. One of them has to do with traffic, so as long as Robin is here, then we should talk about this. We've talked about a potential pedestrian crossing at Continental Boulevard, and there are a number of ways to accomplish that. But currently, we are the only ones that are proposing to have a pedestrian facility to connect to. So, I guess from our point of view, we are reluctant to accede to a request for an open-ended commitment for some future improvement when in fact we're installing upwards of 2,000 linear feet of sidewalk at our expense and then maintaining it in perpetuity at our expense, or I should say at Tom's expense. So I would, it's difficult for me to understand how we would structure such an agreement. And I would offer to you the fact that, if and when phase 2 comes along and there's a demonstrated need for some kind of additional pedestrian improvement, you get another bite at the apple. From a purely selfish standpoint, Mr. Monahan is in the business of, is going to be at least partially in the retail business, presumably with a coffee shop on the site. So we would argue that people from this site would be more interested in going to, at least we would hope, to our coffee shop than across the street to Dunkin' Donuts. So for all of those reasons, and for the fact that Dunkin' Donuts has no pedestrian facility to tie into now, or presumably in the future, since no request such as this was made of them, we're reluctant to agree to that at this time.
We actually did a sidewalk for them, but we accepted a payment in lieu of, and that was
well, it wasn't for them,
we would
actually.
Go back and not do again.
Mr. Chairman, to be very strictly accurate, we also had a payment from the chemical or whatever it was, the people who make the medical facility. They also put in a payment for that because they wanted to have it. But in the end, due to issues between this board and the town, it didn't quite get built, and I believe the money's been returned. Am I not right? Yeah, the money that the medical supply company was paid to the town to have a sidewalk and everything else put in.
None of that really matters to you, other than if we had to do it again. We had another chance. We might do it differently.
But on the positive side, you're getting a couple thousand feet of sidewalk. So I think that's a real improvement to what's out there today.
It is, and I think that there may be a need to cross the Continental Boulevard, but I don't know if it's for Dunkin' Donuts or because of the employees from Maquette, is that their current name? Walk during lunch or something like that and want a place to go or something like that. There are people that walk up and down Continental Boulevard now, and there isn't any place to cross it anywhere along it in terms of a crosswalk. At the same time, there may be just as much desire to say we want to have our own empire and not have, who knows who walking across our site, or encouraging people to walk through your site to go to the folks on Spruce Street and all that. So there's probably as many competing interests that say don't build it as there are that say build it. What you said about phase 2 and there being some more development, and especially since I think my understanding was that was more office related, that may change the dynamic about what need that part of the development brings. And that would probably be some years down the road where we could sort of see what the impact of this one is too. That's interesting. I think even with the sidewalk that you develop around your site, thinking about where it comes close to the edge of pavement so that if you do come with a crosswalk because the state's decided to fund one or something, it connects to something, or there's some way to integrate it into what you've built.
Well,
I think it's pretty important.
We did pay attention to that when we designed the sidewalk. It is at the intersection of Camp Sargent Road, very close to Continental Boulevard, where Green Pond Road comes in. It's very close to Continental Boulevard, and at the intersection of Continental and Industrial, it's very close to the intersection. So it wasn't like we have precluded, future connections, or we didn't think about it, but it needs to be part of a larger thought process and plan with more participants, frankly.
Other comments or questions?
I would agree actually with what the applicant said. I can't believe there's going to be a lot of people from this site. I'm sure as you rightly say, there'll be a coffee shop somewhere in it. You still got Starbucks up the hill. I don't think anybody's going to walk across to Dunkin' Donuts. I think it was, and it wasn't necessary. It's not something to worry about. I mean, there are enough people jogging up and down Continental Boulevard, and they still managed to get across the traffic. I think we were being unrealistic to ask for that.
Other comments or questions? Nelson?
No, I would just agree with that. I think we'll have another bite of the apple in the future at some point. They'll be back for another phase of this, and we can talk about it more then. I would approve this without that requirement right now.
Okay. Any others? Anybody else want to weigh in? Okay. So what else you got for big ones?
There were some questions. Robin, I think
good.
We're done with you.
Okay.
There were some questions about phasing, and actually, phasing plan is. Come back here.
Yeah, there's questions on phasing.
The question really was, Gordon, is the need for you to actually identify each building into a separate phase, because you're going to want COs building by building, right. Whereas you were originally calling the whole thing as phase 1, which meant you'd have to build the whole thing before you could get a CO.
And thus the phasing plan that I have.
Right.
Up on the board here.
Oh, that's perfect.
What we've done is we've looked at 5 phases actually. Phase 1A, and this is 1A through 1E. Yeah. Phase 1A is the offsite improvements, the esplanade or the main driveway, along with the emergency access. So that all gets built first with any other phase, because you need it for access and you need it for safety. Phase 1B is the 2 residential buildings along with the commercial space that's on the ground floor. This includes the kind of circular drive in the center, and it includes all of this parking down here. What I did was I took the shared parking analysis and I split out each building by use and did an individual parking analysis for each building. So within each of these phases is the required parking for each group of uses. Phase 1C is the hotel building with the event center and a little bit of retail. That also has parking associated with it here, and includes the roadway in between buildings, the hotel and the office retail building. And then the last two phases are this office retail building, which has a smaller amount of parking in the back, and the third residential building, which is back here. The only stipulation really is that Phase 1A goes before anybody else, or along with any other phase. Phase 1B or 1C has to go before Phase 1D or 1E. So, because the way the shared parking works is that you can't take the individual buildings and do an aggregate, because the numbers at some point fall apart.
That makes sense.
You know, you have to take it as a whole. So, but we're confident that if one, and the strategy here is to actually start 1C and 1B first, and then follow along with 1D and 1E at a later date. So that all works.
Yeah.
Whether 1B or 1C is occupied, ready for occupancy first, is a matter of conjecture. It depends on how long it takes to get financing, because the financing is different for each phase. But, you know, we're confident that 1C, 1B, in conjunction with 1A, stand alone adequately, so they could be occupied separately, essentially.
That makes a lot of sense, although I would love it if you just went 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 instead of A, B, C, D. It'd be so much easier. And then when you built something else, it could be, you know, phase 7. C, I think?
Yep, C, which
C.
is the hotel.
So does that sort of wrap all the way around B over to Camp Sargent Road?
It includes the sidewalk.
Yeah.
So put the sidewalk in B, not in C.
Okay, that's fine.
It should get built early on.
Well, I mean, they're both going to happen at the same time, actually. It's just it's a
Easy
matter
enough
of-
to put it in B then.
That's right. Absolutely. You're absolutely right.
But thank you for developing the phasing plan. This makes a lot of sense. I assume that this makes part of the final plan set so that the records have it.
Now, the other thing that we talked about was a twofold issue. One was the proximity of the building and the parking and the emergency access road to the neighbors and the buffer. We've looked at it. The simple fact is that we need these 19 spaces. They're very important to the project because they're associated directly with that residential building, and would be convenient to the residents of that building. We did remove lighting so that, you know, we can be as unobtrusive as possible. The other thing that we've done is we took a look at the plantings along the edge of this existing buffer, and we've increased about 60% of them from 6 to 8 feet to 8 to 10 feet. So we have, for example, anything with a 2 after it is the taller material. So you'll get, it's not a monolithic wall of plant materials, but it's going to look a little bit more like it's been there for a while if you have varying heights of materials. But the intent here was to increase the height of the screening materials where it makes the most sense. In addition, we added, as I think we discussed when we were out on site, or perhaps at the last meeting, we added evergreen trees in this location so that we could help shield the neighbors from any kind of headlights that might shine in their direction. And I think that would be...
So do you know any more specifics about the variety of trees you're talking about planting there? And even if you don't know those specific names, I'm really interested in their mature height.
All of those trees are, I mean, it's a mixture of balsam fir and white spruce. They are, and then there are also some Austrian pines mixed in throughout the development, not in that screening vegetation, but elsewhere along the periphery of the project.
So those varieties all have foliage down to the ground when they're mature?
Correct. And
branches.
The Austrian pines are a little bit shorter, but the balsam fir and the white spruce are all in the sort of 40 to 60 foot range.
At maturity.
At maturity.
But so you're not putting any pines in the buffer for building it?
No, that's correct.
That's what I wanted to hear. Yeah.
That's correct.
I don't work care else.
No, we don't, I mean, white pines are certainly a perfectly nice plant. I have nothing against them
No,
personally.
me neither. But
we
they're not
have plenty of them, and I'd rather have other materials.
They're not a winter season buffer.
No, because once they become mature, the Austrian pines keep their branches down low as well. So all of the evergreen trees that we're proposing are what we call self-heading, which means that they are down to the ground.
That's fine.
And the only other thing that I think you had requested that we actually just submitted this afternoon was a blasting plan. We took the blasting plan that was developed for premium outlets and we modified it to reflect the conditions that are at this property. I think it's important to note that we are not anticipating any significant blasting based on the geotechnical information that we have today. And certainly, to the extent practicable, we'll use mechanical means to get rid of rock, but in the event that blasting is required, we have a protocol that was acceptable on the other project using emulsified materials to prevent groundwater contamination. We also have the monitoring program that we will implement during construction, and so we're confident that the impacts are understandable and are controllable.
So I remember last time that the premium outlets blasting plan was discussed, there was a whole lot of discussion about pre-blast surveys of the surrounding.
There would be pre-blast surveys. To the extent that there's any blasting, there would always be pre-blast surveys. The pre-blast surveys would be within 500 feet of the trench blasting. We're not talking about production blasting as we did up on the hill. There aren't going to be the big 30,000 yard blasts. We're anticipating that it's only going to be for utilities and perhaps for foundations. So it'll be a limited area that will be 100% matted and so forth. But the pre-blast surveys are in accordance with the guidance that's put out by, I was just looking at a document that's put out by DOT, and this actually 500 feet is twice as far as they recommend. So that's what we're proposing.
But that surely is a much shorter distance than was agreed for the outlet malls.
What was agreed for the outlet malls was 1,000 feet. Maybe it was 1,500 feet.
It was 1,500 feet.
But I will say to you again that we're not talking about blasting 20, 30,000 yards at a time. We're talking about blasting 20 yards at a time. So it's a completely different deal. And we will certainly follow all of the requirements that the fire department imposes upon us in application for a blasting plan. Again, we don't anticipate a significant amount of blasting, but in case we run into something that we can't mechanically remove, we reserve the right to do some blasting.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of what we talked about last time, and I've looked at Tim's memo to the board, and I will say that we're in agreement, with the exception of the things we've just talked about. We're in agreement with all of their comments. We will, the landscape stuff is pretty easy. I guess, Merrimack Conservation Commission recommends the use of only native plants in the landscape design. I guess I would, as a licensed landscape architect, I would push back a little bit on that and say that, strictly speaking, native plant materials are terrific, but they're not always adequately available in the nursery trade. I prefer to call them cultivars, ornamental cultivars of native plant materials. So the species may be the same, but they may be improved varieties that express drought tolerance and so forth that are desirable traits. So, are they GMO or not GMO? It's like I can't tell you they're hybrid.
I'm not concerned about that. Just stay away from invasives.
Yes, we absolutely will stay away from invasives.
You do that, I think that's all I was really looking for.
We had talked about salt and de-icing compounds. I mean, we are amenable to no sodium chloride, but would like to, in pedestrian areas where necessary, use limited amounts of other de-icing compounds in accordance with DES Green Snow Pro standards. Magnesium chloride, and there are several other compounds that are approved for use.
So we've got to let's talk about that a little bit more, because Green Snow Pro is a salt application. It's sodium and chloride. It's just limited and liquefied and some other specialties, but it's not switching up the variety.
We're not going to use sodium chloride.
Okay. Now, some of the other things that are other varieties of chlorides still end up with the risk of chlorides in the well, even if it's potassium or magnesium or something else. You've still got the chloride component that goes into the wells. And so I want to be clear what the board's intentions are with whether we're talking about allowing those things or saying sand and shovels.
If it's your practice for sand only, I guess.
I don't know. I don't see what the board thinks. Usually it's been that it's a sand only.
I don't want to see salt in any form around there.
Okay. The
Good evening, Mark Forostic with VHB. I was at the Conservation Commission meeting, and just to point out, their recommendation was, to allow the use of salt in pedestrian areas, not the entire parking lot. But so they were amenable to the use of salt for safety reasons in pedestrian areas. Just for clarification.
That doesn't quite square with Tim's memo dated March 1, 2018. If you look at item 7D, it says, due to the relative flat nature of the site, MCC, Merrimack Conservation Committee, recommends the parking surface be treated sanding only, but they do agree the pedestrian walkways could be loaded with salt. I personally think they're wrong. I think given the proximity of well number X, and I don't remember which one it is, in this immediate area, I'd hate to see any salt around. We've got enough problems with water in this town one way or another, and it haven't been helped with what happened in Concord today, for those of you who haven't caught up. But I don't want to see any salt in this area. Sorry. And I understand what MCC is saying, but I don't think they put enough strength. The problem in this area, I know the amount you're going to put down is probably minor, but the biggest problem we have in this area anyway is salt, because the town, not the town, DOT, and still will use salt on Continental, much as though we don't want them to. So if anything we can screw salt down, I would like to see it, and I would wish that you wouldn't use salt.
I tend to agree with all of that stuff, even though I think the DOT is the supplier of salt in the area, simply because with all of the things we're going on with water, we're kind of running out of wells in town, and there's two good ones kind of right across the street. Yeah. So let's keep those working. I have more curiosity about the parking and how that's changed and developed with the shared parking and where all of that is laid out in the plan, which tells me the number of spaces and how you did that. Is that on one of the sheets of the plan?
We submitted.
I know I've seen it at different times, but I feel like things have changed here and there, and I want to make sure we're both
not
currently.
appreciably, Mr. Chairman. The shared parking analysis is a spreadsheet, and the spreadsheet is based on the ULI methodology for mixed-use developments.
Yep.
So what you do is it's a square footage calculation. So by square footage, you take the different uses. The different uses have different parking demand characteristics, and those characteristics are broken out by utilization ratios by time of day. So
I know that you've presented this at times, and I get it and I support it. I just, somewhere on the plan, there's got to be a number of spaces.
there is a number of spaces.
Where?
It is on the layout and materials sheet.
C3?
Yeah.
Perfect. Find C3.
C2.
I couldn't help but picking on you with the plan references on the front cover. You apparently did your site plans 10 months from now, your site lighting plans.
Oh, 10 months from now?
December 2018.
Well, in fairness, that was Procon that did that, so.
C3.
It's C2, actually.
C2.
Is that it?
Rapid summary chart.
Can you read that?
Wait.
Take your glasses off.
Take them off?
Yeah.
That doesn't help.
It doesn't help.
3. I don't have, oh,
1,025 spaces.
I moved it.
Required by shared parking is 786, and provided is 889.
Okay, so at the end of the day, we're going to have 889 spaces instead of the maximum that could be spit out by our formula of 1,025.
Correct.
Perfect. That's what I wanted to see on here. Now, you mentioned that those are going to stay consistent through all the phases, that you've figured out what needs to be in each phase.
What we did was what I did was take the uses that were in each one of those phases. So each building has, a use delineated. So building E has 5,800 square feet of retail, has a 5,000 square foot event center, has 120 rooms, hotel rooms. For each one of those uses, I plugged that into the spreadsheet that we have and came up with a maximum number of spaces.
Okay.
So, and that's what we included in the phase.
Okay.
So, and the difficulty that I was talking about, which I think you understand, is that when you get to the later phases and you've already provided this other parking, that parking is shared too. So you wind up with actually less in the phase than might otherwise be required because it's already been provided in another phase, and it's being used at a different time of day than the other uses. So that's why building the first phases, building B and C, and building E have to go before building D or building A. Do you understand that?
Yeah, so building A is the one closest to Spruce Street?
Correct.
Okay. I'm glad that was one of your last buildings to build in your phasing plan. I think that was a good choice. So when you supply us the phasing plan that looks like the one you put up there before,
Yep.
Include a
Which-
parking table that shows the number of parking spaces that are going to go into
In
each
each
phase.
phase.
Yeah.
All right, we can do that.
So that whoever is out there trying to figure out whether you built the right amount has something
Yeah,
to
and
guess
there, and there are notes on the phasing plan that say exactly what I've said. You need to build, the roadway first, then you build either of the other two phases first, and then you can build the other phases.
So the roadway you build in Phase A, which is kind of the boulevard between the buildings, that's not going to be your construction access because you would destroy your brand new road with that. So
Well, we may not finish code it either, until we're further along. But substantially, the way that I think it's going to work is that we can use some of this area where Building A is going for laydown space for these two buildings. We can use, we can use some of this for building E, and then when that's done, that all opens up as parking. And then when building D is constructed, we can use this for laydown space. So it actually, works out reasonably well for construction staging. And, we don't, is there going to be construction traffic on some of these roads? Perhaps, but we'll take care not to mess them up before we're done.
Or if you do, you'll fix them.
That's right.
Other comments or questions? Okay, so I understand the parking. I'm satisfied with that. I like the phasing, the way that you've set it up with, especially with building A being one of the last, if not the last, to be built. I think that's one that has the impact on it. I talked about the roundabout. Let's talk about the access road moving towards the neighborhood and what the buffer situation is there. I want to make sure it's really clear in our record that you're observing the 100-foot no disturb buffer that you're required to observe.
That's correct.
And that whatever else has been there in the past has been there as a matter of either convenience because you didn't need that space or whatever it was, but it was never anything outside of 100 feet is not and wasn't, quote, buffer.
Here's the buffer, and the dashed line is the 100-foot buffer from the lot line. We're approximately at the closest spot. We're approximately 120. The edge of the paved area of the access road is approximately 120 feet from the property line, so 20 feet in excess of the 100-foot buffer.
Okay.
What this doesn't show is the additional landscaping that's going into that area, but be that as it may, our intention is to not disturb any of the 100-foot buffer.
Yeah.
Then in addition to that, there's a building setback, and the building setback is a 200-foot minimum building setback. We are also abiding by that.
Okay. So although the access road is moving, it used to be 160 and it's going to go to 120, and it's still all the buffer that you've ever been obligated to require.
That's exactly right.
Okay. Comments or questions on buffers?
So, excuse me.
Yes, Tom.
So, I heard you say at the beginning that you really want those 19 spaces, and I guess I'm just having a hard time with that because it's causing all of the consternation over moving that access road for those 19 spaces versus how many units do you have in that building, and can you just amplify a little bit more on why?
There are 71 units in this building. There are 18, 28, 29, 39, 49, 58, 68. With the 19 spaces, there are 78 spaces, either underneath or immediately adjacent to that building. So, and we need to have one space per unit that is convenient.
That is convenient.
Right.
I think the requirement is that you have more, but
well,
you're
I mean,
right
we
that
need to
you
have
do-
at least
Yeah.
one, for marketability, we need to have at least one space per unit.
Yeah, I get that.
And then overall, we have, and not for nothing, within the shared parking calculation, there's one space per unit that is not shared. In other words, they're always, well, it's not designated, but it's always available to the residential use. So it's not used by anybody else.
Yeah, but where are they? I mean, when you were showing your phasing plan, you were including almost all of that parking lot
That's
down there
correct.
as part of the residential parking.
That's correct.
Which is not anywhere near the building.
We have tried to incorporate 192 spaces in immediate proximity to those residential buildings, which is one space per unit. And then other parking spaces are provided, but they're provided, in a more remote location.
Okay. I still see that 19 spaces as being the biggest thorn in this whole project. And I don't know how you deal with that otherwise, but well, it's creating extra problems for everybody, but.
That's kind of the same sentiment that I expressed last time, but I understand that if the applicant's abiding by the regulations in terms of their setback and their buffer, there's a limited amount of arm twisting that we can do to get extra concessions and some things. And I don't know that we can sort of rewrite our regulation and say, okay, well, let's have some more. You know, it said 100, but we really meant 150. But those same spaces had me, bent out of shape last time too. So they're exactly the thing that's between this and, I don't know if that's a satisfactory answer.
Well, no, I just, going back to when the access road was laid out, why it was laid out where it was, I mean, by MPO and stuff like that, and now secondary use is coming in to use that space, wanting to change it and move it from where it was put down. I understand it's your property. I understand there's setbacks that you have to require and stuff like that, but there's also the fact that it was put there, and now you're talking about moving it, and it impacts other people. Just trying to understand that.
Tom, you want to add something to it? Or?
No, there's a switch on the side of it.
Tom Monahan, owner of the property and the developer going forward, hopefully, if the good Lord and the planning board approves the plan. But, those 19 spaces are of consternation for me as well. And I mean, I would love, and if there was a way that I could go to the town and get an easement to put 19 spots in that abutting on the town-owned land, I would love to be able to do that. But the chairman of the board of the town council just says no. Just kidding. No. Really? No, I would love to do it. I'm going to try diligently to avoid it. That is why we chose to do the building last. Maybe there's a way we can alleviate the consternation. And but presently, as it stands, we just need those 19 spaces there. And I pledge to the board and to the abutters that, frankly, not in that order. I pledge to the abutters that I will work with them and find a way, if we can, to move those units. And I know how I do understand that we're conforming to the ordinance, but similar to those crazy turn lanes on the roundabout, maybe there's a way we can work it out so it's a successful and a happy ending. And I will work diligently to that, not only with the planning board and the planning staff, but with the abutters.
Thank you, Tom. That's a great comment. I do have a question for you before you go away. I know that the idea of that funny triangle of land belongs to the town, and could you get an easement or access? But is there a route to do that? To get the town's permission to put your parking over there?
We thought the state owned it, so we went to the state and asked them, not for anything other than an easement, maybe frankly to avoid the buffer.
Yeah.
And so we could put some parking there. And they came back, the state came back, they were very cooperative, but they came back and said the town of Merrimack owns it. And I've actually owned the outlet land when Simon got approved, and I've owned the land since '97 or something. And Jay Mancara always said to me when he was the town planner, come on in and see if we can do something with that land and get it on the tax rolls. But I never did. But you know, and I don't know if there's even an opportunity to do that, but I'm not afraid to ask. And if there's a way that we could, but that's only part of the story. If there's a way that we can move the parking away from the residents, I'm all in. Or, you know, as an alternative, additional buffers, frankly, whatever it takes. And I don't know if anybody wants a wall or anything. I don't think it makes a lot of sense from both sides of that wall, but that's not a political statement. But but I definitely, certainly, you know, whatever it takes, I'm all in.
I don't know if that is an avenue to figure out how to access that property, or if there is an avenue to access it, but I think I would support it from the planning board standpoint if we had any way to, I know we don't have any decision-making power over it, but if we have any way to make a recommendation or encourage it, I don't even know what the process is. I think you'd probably have to petition the town council to either buy it or purchase an easement on it, and then it would go from there.
That's it, you know, get it on the tax rolls without, you know, a lot of adverse issues. But anyways, that's a question that I can ask along the way, but certainly, again, I want to reiterate that whatever it takes, we're willing to certainly give it our best shot. And, you know, and I think the abutters know. Fortunately, I live 3 miles away, and I think they know where I live. So, thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you for the comment. Anything you want to add, Gordon?
No, the only other thing that comes to mind is we did have an opportunity to chat with Ron Miner, who's the superintendent of Merrimack Village District. He didn't have any specific concerns, wanted to review any kind of blasting information that we might have, and wanted to, you know, from a supply standpoint, he had no issues, because that was kind of all worked out previously with the mall development, and we're well within those standards. So,
thank you for some of the easy ones that you went through very quickly at the beginning. The lights that were removed and things. I think that those things are pretty important to the houses next door. Regardless of what else happens as we go through the process, less is better in terms of light over on that boundary.
Yeah, this actually shows those lights. I apologize for that, but this is the old set.
Understood. Does any member of the planning board have more questions for the applicant before we open up the floor to the public? Nelson?
Just a couple of questions, but first of all, while we're on the subject of that buffer and so on in the parking, there is an island of, I don't know what, maybe grass, between the parking lot of question here, next to Building A, and the road, the emergency road.
In here.
Yeah. That, in there, yeah. It seems that could serve as a host place for some substantial planting that might screen the parking from the view, at least, of the people living beyond there.
Down
you
here.
know. Oh, you've got something in there.
Well,
yes.
those are red maples. I mean, we can.
I'm thinking more like a privet hedge, a dense hedge of some
Well,
kind.
we can.
Yeah.
I would suggest something other than. I would suggest something evergreen. So
Okay.
we can revise the plans to.
Isn't there already a grade difference there between that parking lot and the buffer area
Mark, what's
towards the
the-
houses?
Yeah,
I thought there was
this
4 or 5
is
foot.
4 or 5 feet. This land up here is 4 feet or so above the grade
street.
of the street. Or three
Yeah, I thought
to
the
3 to
screening
4
of that-
feet.
I thought the screening of that was already appropriate. The reason for kind of talking about it was it's what makes the access road move, and if it didn't have to be there, then that would resolve that bit. More than worried about whether the cars are visible. I didn't think they would be.
No, I don't think they will be either.
Okay. Mistook that.
What's
Yeah.
the grade? What's the grade difference between these two?
The grade difference between the parking lot and the road is, obviously where it connects, where the access road connects, there's no difference, and it's maybe 2 feet.
Oh, 2 feet
2 to
here.
3 feet, yeah. There's a slope down, so the parking lot's a little higher than the road.
But the actual buffer area is a handful of feet higher up, isn't it?
The buffer area is a handful of feet.
Correct.
Yes,
4 or 5 feet or something.
Yeah.
So car headlights and things like that aren't going to get through that.
No, and the vehicles are pointed in the opposite direction anyway. So, they're coming in, there may be a vehicle swing, but, they're pointed toward the building, not.
Well, that's
the
a bit,
neighbors.
that's not necessarily so, Gordon. I mean, people can come in and then back into that parking lot.
They can do many
Yeah, you
things.
see that. You see, again, you're dealing with people, and I like the point Nelson made, that if you put that little island and really filled it up with more spruce, if there work there, it would be a great thing, because it'll buffer noise and headlights.
We can certainly do that.
Okay, good.
Well,
Thank you.
I still think they ought to move the parking over to the side where the town property is.
Well,
and I'll speak
may
with
be
the
one
chairman,
of-
because
as
if
one
she's
as the
thinking that there's some reason we
council here,
can't,
you
then
could
I
have
need
a
to
quick
understand
council
that.
meeting and agree it, but never mind.
Yes.
My other comment was it was more of a question. It's intended, I've been understanding all along, that all of this property is going to remain in the same ownership throughout the development phase and everything. And it doesn't have to be subdivided for financing or anything like that. Okay, I just wanted to clarify that.
May have to come back to financing, but I don't think so.
Yeah. Okay, nobody ever said one way or another, and I just wanted to know.
Thank you. Other comments or questions? Okay, well, let's give up the table, and we will invite the abutters and citizens to give us their opinion on things.
Hi, I am Barb Amaral, and I'm at 1 Spruce. So I just had a couple of questions. There was a mention of planting the trees that would be 40 to 60 feet at maturity, but I'm wondering what height, and I think you might have mentioned it, but I missed it. What height will they be at planting, and how quickly will it take them to reach their mature height?
So they did talk about them, but we'll make sure that we get some clarification on the height so that we're sure, because there's been different discussions about different heights. I think they've gradually bumped them up into something in the 10 to 12 foot range, but we'll get them to clarify it. I don't know about the specific trees they're talking about in terms of their maturity. For some of the arborvitae and things that I looked at between last meeting and this meeting, they grow between 6 and 12 inches a year. So it takes a year for a foot if it's a good growing season. So it's a long time before they get to that mature height. Part of the ability to have it dense, low to the ground, is that's what those species do in terms of their growth patterns. The things that grow fast are the white pines, which is what you don't want any of. So.
Right.
That is the push-pull. It'll be a long time before they're at mature height. They don't necessarily have to be at fully mature height before they start to really make an impact and affect the screening. But
right. So speaking of that, I guess as far as the ground in the buffer, it does slope back gently towards the homes. So while it is I was just out there today, 3 to 4 feet at the road, it does slope down. So when you cut back from the road, it's not going to be as much of a differential. So what the differential will be 30 feet back from where the road,
yeah,
hard to tell.
That's a good point, but it's also, while you raise it, we can talk to the applicant about it, but if they're going to cut that bank back to move the road, they're going to have a whole lot of dirt to do something with, and maybe just
putting
it, not necessarily like an enormous berm, but just the spoils that you have right there.
Yeah, yep.
Putting there.
So as far as the infamous 19 spaces, one question I have is why, so there's all the parking down at the bottom as we're looking at it.
Yeah.
Why can't a row, at the bottom of that, there was a row of parking horizontally? I mean, why couldn't that be moved and then everything shifted down? So the 19 spaces are still there, but there's room for them without moving the road.
I'll have to let the applicant address that. I think that one of their concerns is not just do they have all of the spaces that they need in the formula, but are they proximate to the building where somebody who is going to live in that building would feel like they had a space.
Right, I'm not saying move the 19, I'm saying move parking down in the big parking lot so that everything could shift down by the length of a parking spot.
That I do remember their answer on, and again, I'll let them defend it. So when I give their answers, I'm not arguing with you because I'm not taking their position. I'm just repeating what they've
Right.
said. But that's Phase Z or something is going to be down there in that parking lot, which is the ability to put some office buildings down there and a big parking deck and things. And that's why they don't want these buildings moved south. So they've still got that area open for the last phase, whatever that would be. I know they've called it Phase 2, but that's after 1A through something.
Mm-hmm. And one other question. I know how to use a computer. There you go. So, well, maybe I just answered my own question. But what I was going to ask is, there's a lot more spots or external spots around Building A than there are around Building C. So I don't know what the number of units are in A versus C.
There's underneath
But-
parking too.
Well, I know, but so I guess my question is, why aren't there as many external, i.e. not underneath spots around Building C? Why aren't they needed on Building C when they are needed on Building A? I don't know if it's because Building C has fewer units.
I don't know. I'll have to
But-
let them answer that. I
So
couldn't guess.
that was another question I had. And that's it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you for that.
You take the pen back?
It's the difference between retail and residential.
Oh, was it?
There's one behind the
I can't believe Gordon was
There's-
He took my pen last time, but it wasn't Gordon this time.
Beth, there's one hiding right behind the
Oh,
computer.
is it?
Sorry about that.
Okay, that's all right.
Now, once you get signed in, Beth, and you're ready to go, I know that you've sent a letter to each of us. And if you want us to read the letter into the record, we can, in addition to your testimony. But if you want to cover it in your testimony too, whatever you want to do, whatever you choose.
Whichever's fine. It's basically things I pretty much have said before, and, you know, I guess I'm just my way of trying harder for positive results on both ends. What I wanted to ask is the street water basically runs, all the rain drainage runs through that brook diagonally behind my house. And then we have that gate that was put around it for protection and everything else for it, which the town basically owns. Is that remaining as it is?
The drainage structure, that thing that looks like a funny detention pond and all of that, yes, that's none of that is changing.
Okay, and that's
required to change.
documented that that stays exactly as it is? The builder, everybody's aware that that stays as it is?
If it hasn't been, then Robert, write it down to make sure that that's one of our conditions.
Yeah, I think it's only fair that that be put in writing then and documented,
It
that
probably
the
is,
gate,
but
the
let's just
fence
make sure.
around it isn't touched, it isn't pushed in further towards the houses on Spruce, it's left like it is.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And then, what else I was as I've mentioned before, and it has been in recording, it has been noted the buffer would not be touched, the emergency exit would not be touched, because the emergency exit technically didn't need to be anything fancy. It's just an emergency exit for emergency use only, and it's been fine. But then all of a sudden, it's like moving in 30 feet, and then it became 40 feet in, which is a good amount of space with the trees that are there and how close and open this development is to our homes. So what I'm wondering is, does that have to be an alternative? Can't we find another way for the 19 parking spaces or whatever that is involved in that decision?
So that's what we're discussing with the applicant. And as I mentioned before, as a board, we're sort of climbing out on the limb a little bit. We can require them to do what's in our regulations, and the applicant has done that. And then we're twisting his arm, and he's been a little generous with some extra plantings and some things that maybe aren't strictly required, including, I think, offering some plantings that are closer to the homes on Spruce Street as an accommodation. How much arm twisting we can do to get concessions is, how far out on that limb that we're going to go. And at some point, if the limb breaks and the applicant says, that's it, I'm not doing it anymore, as a board, we don't have any legal authority to even be out that far on the limb, much less try and push further.
Right. I would just think for 19 parking spaces, I mean, is there I would think there should be another way of working around that, just with a little compassion for us, abutters too, just to, even, with what Tom noted too, and the part of the property, which we know exactly where it is because we've seen it more than once in person, where the town technically owns. So
would that be a better solution for you if the town was able to work out some kind of a situation where the parking was on the Continental Boulevard side?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I think that the applicant has indicated that they'll at least try, and the planning board supports it. I don't know whether there's other obstacles that we're just not aware of yet to that particular solution.
And with all due respect, I would like to think, if the shoes were on the other foot and I was the business person, could we look at the drawing again? Is there technically a way of kind of changing something a little bit so we have 19 parking spaces here, and then not, and if they decide they honestly put effort into it and determine they can't, then go with the other plan of putting it over where the town owns it instead of, sorry, we have to go and take this much from you. I just would really greatly appreciate it if we could, find an alternative.
I heard the applicant stand up there
Right.
and say just
Right.
exactly that.
But
And
I just
don't
hope the
think we
town
can-
hope the town can do it, though. That's still on, that would still be on the table.
I
Yeah.
heard him say, and you're asking him to look at that.
Mhm.
And I've heard him say that he's intending on doing that to find a way, if there's a way of doing it, and whether it's asking the town or not asking the town, he has said he appreciates the issue and will look at it to see if there's something to be done about that.
Right,
So
and
he's
I
done
do,
it-
I
he's
do
done
appreciate
exactly
Tom
what you
saying
have
that.
asked
All
just
right,
now.
I do appreciate that, but my only worry is if by chance that didn't happen, could we nevertheless still possibly find another alternative is all.
We can keep
I do
looking
appreciate it.
We can keep
very
looking
much.
and dealing with the applicant and talking with them. I just want to make it clear that at some point when the applicant says, this is what I want you to vote on, if it meets the regulations, then he's entitled to his vote. And some of these things that we're talking about doing are, asking more of the applicant than the regulations require, which if he's willing to do, that's fantastic. And I always encourage applicants to be good neighbors because
Of course.
they've got to be there and live and survive as neighbors with folks. So
Right.
We're doing our best to encourage and do all of that exploration you're talking about. At the end of the day, if we get to where we've tried all of those things and maybe the applicant thinks that they've already explored some of those things, and I have no doubt the applicants thought about lots of ideas that never made it onto paper in front of us when they thought about how to lay out the project. They probably thought about 100 different variations that for whatever reason weren't ones that went forward. And it doesn't really work for us to keep going through redesigning it with them and saying, well, what about this, what about that, and going through the iterations that they've tried on their own. At some point, there's a limit to what we can push them on, but we're still having the conversation with them, and they're still amenable to having it with us, so.
Mhm. And I
here we are.
appreciate that. That's what I'm just saying,
Yep.
in my mind, I just hope that, I would agree, I would rather it be
Now, I know
over
that
in the town here. I think that would be much better for all. It would be easier for them, and it would obviously help us abutters too.
I know all of the discussion about the road and whether it was going to stay and whether it was going to move, and we first thought it was going to stay, and then it was, the initial plan actually reflected that it was going to move. We just somehow miscommunicated that when the applicant was describing it to us. The actual plan did show it moving, we just weren't tuned into that. But the real issue that, as I remember it from, standing in your backyard, was the buildings themselves. And the buildings at 200 feet would be there whether the road moved or the road didn't move. So that seemed like the big issue was how close the buildings were to your house and what you would be able to see out your back door. The roadway kind of at the ground level between you and them, the difference of that move may not be as perceptible as a movement in the building, or as maybe we might guess it might be, trying to look into the future at what the location of the roadway will be.
Okay.
I'm not sure, I mean, you don't have to agree with me or disagree with me or comment on it, but I think that regardless of whether the road moves or not, the building would be at 200 feet, which is exactly where it is today. We're not talking about moving the building further away, I guess is the point that I was talking
Right.
about.
But I'm just talking about what can remain behind our homes in the buffer to begin with. That's what I'm talking about. I'm not arguing the buildings. I'm not arguing the hotel. I'm not getting into that. I understand that. Okay, I may not think it's all great, but I understand it. Okay, and I'm trying to be respectful about it. So all I'm asking and hoping for is that we can continue to have what privacy we have left, as well as some other trees and landscaping added. That's what I'm asking.
Okay.
And just so the parking and other things, the 19 parking spaces and other things don't take some of that away from us is what I'm asking. So I'm not trying to create a make a huge mountain out of, over the buildings where they are or this. I like what I have left behind my house, just to the trees to remain. That's all. I just didn't want anything to be taken from us, and then you plant a couple of trees there, but we have to wait 20 years for them to be tall enough, is what I'm saying. So I would just appreciate it if stuff could be worked so the buffer stays as it is, as has been stated more than once, not just by me. And additional landscaping and other things be put in to accommodate that privacy and separation.
Okay, I
And-
understand what you're asking.
And like I said, and then the town, if the town can have them put their parking on the town properties, but I'm for that. That's all I'm saying.
Okay. Understood.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Who's next?
Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Mills. Don't forget to introduce yourself.
Oh, I'm sorry, my name is Michael Mills. I live on Arbor Street in Merrimack.
The microphone. I think you need the microphone. Right, yeah.
Yes, my name is Michael Mills, and I live at 7 Arbor Street in Merrimack. I prepared a little handout that I'd like to hand out, if I may.
Of course you can.
Um,
Have you got enough copies for all of the board?
I have plenty of copies for everybody.
Oh, beautiful, thanks.
With extra copies for anyone who needs an extra one.
So tell us what you're giving us.
Oh, you've given me two
Okay,
minutes.
what I
Or
did
they-
was,
oh,
I had an
sorry.
opportunity the last several months since this has been pending to visit the planning board and go through. One more? Here you go.
Thank you.
Need another one?
No, I think
Okay.
that's good.
To go through the minutes of some of the meetings and some of the notes and things that I found inside the planning board. And what I tried to do was just, these kind of notes for myself, but I figure it might be easier if everyone had a copy of what I was looking at, so sometimes I don't explain things as well as I probably should, and my apologies for that downside.
No, you're doing fine.
But I just wanted to mention on the police report, there was a lot of discussion about the roundabout. And the police report dated 12/18/17 that was written by Captain Dudash is really very clear, and I'm not sure that some of the points that the police department has reiterated in this report have really been addressed. We talk about how many cars and how easy it's going to be to get around the roundabout, but the police report went on further to talk about the fact that during certain times, there's actually, the roadways become congested, and will the roundabout take care of that congestion? Has that been looked at? The report went on to say that that gridlock occurs. Now, not every day, obviously, but we're talking about the holidays and, Black Friday and all these other things that, is this the best way to have the entrance into this project? And I know that we have, the developer has the engineers looking at it, and they're all saying, yes, I think it's a Class C, if I heard correctly, entryway for traffic. Maybe it should be a grade A. But when we have 1 to 2 hour delays as per the police department, and when there's when they recommend that there be 3 lanes going into the roundabout, I think we need to listen to them. I don't mean to in any way criticize the planning board, but I believe that the police department, since they're there directing the traffic, since they're the ones that are there handling accidents that occur, since they're the ones that we respond with the fire department, that they probably have a pretty decent idea of what's necessary to make sure that the traffic coming in and out of that area is properly handled. Now, perhaps the planning board has talked to them, but when I sit back there and I listen to this, it seems like the police report is just being ignored. And perhaps I'm wrong, I hope that I am. But they've brought up certain valid points, and I think those valid points should be addressed by this board before any further consideration of what type of roundabout should be built out there. The other part of the police report that I wanted to bring up was their comment and their strong suggestion that without proper buffering of the project and the adjacent residential neighborhood, that there's going to be problems. And in that report, they tried to come up with a suggestion on eliminating those problems by suggesting that a berm be built 20 feet high with tall trees on it. I didn't get the impression that they meant to tear down the trees that are there and replace it with a 20-foot berm. My reading of that was somebody's got to build, and the developer has to build a 20-foot berm to properly protect the neighborhood from any annoyance that this project can build. And there's certainly enough space there between the building. You have to move the building a little bit. You have to move the building a little bit, build a 20-foot berm, and put the 8-foot trees on top of it and wait for it to grow 6 inches to 12 inches a year. I'm not going to be here. I'm sorry. I'd like to see something that's shielding this now and not 20 or 30 years from now. And I think that's what the police department meant when they talked about a berm. Don't tear down the berm that's there. Build some type of protective shielding from the buildings so that they don't become a nuisance with the neighborhood. The next area that I looked into was the value of the surrounding properties. I've seen 2 numbers come by. I saw a 500 million, I think it is, 500,000 I don't know, we're talking about 500 million, we're talking about 500,000. $500,000 tax revenue coming into the city, into the town as a result of this project. I did the calculations, and that figures out to be less than $1 per household per month. So this is not a big moneymaker project where people are going to sit back and say, oh God, I'm glad that this is here, I'm glad, look at how our taxes went down. It's approximately $1 per month on the average price of a house. They talked at the meeting on 11/18/15, the value of the surrounding properties would not be diminished because the setbacks and buffers of residential properties will provide the existing residential properties from any adverse impact. When you had an opportunity of going out there to look at what a 65-foot tall building is going to look like, either from my house, 7 Arbor Street, or from any of the adjacent properties on Spruce Street, there is an adverse effect. And that adverse effect is going to have a detrimental effect on the property values of those properties that are directly affected. And I can speak on behalf of that, having been in real estate for over 45 years. They're going to have a serious detrimental effect. And the planning board should have the responsibility of making sure that that doesn't happen. And certainly planting a 10-foot tree does not shield a 65-foot tall building. It just doesn't. And then when you look at the further notes, it's not that there's going to be several trees planted. According to the notes in the planning board, there's going to be 3 trees per backyard planted. Now, if the average backyard is 150 feet long, you know, and width, you have a tree, what, every 50 feet? That doesn't even come close to any type of a buffer. And yet, that's what was proposed at the last meeting. The values of adjacent residential properties will decrease if there's not proper buffering taking place. The proposal will alter the essential character of the locality. They talk about the third or fourth item down. It says everything's permitted except the apartments. Well, we're talking about 19 parking spots, and what a problem those 19 parking spots are going to cause. I have a suggestion. Why don't we get rid of 19 apartments? Actually, we don't have to get rid of 19 apartments. We only have to get rid of 9, because the town requirement is at least 2 parking spots per 2-bedroom apartment. Now, when you look at this plan, there's not a single foot out there for, let me take that back. There's a couple feet of green space. But I've never seen in this town a project that just keeps getting bigger and bigger. One comment that was made at the last meeting was that we can build the building as tall as we want because there's no requirements in the town for height requirements. Well, you have to have a place to park. And to come in, and I'll cover that in a minute. Let me just cover this other item here that talked about the proposed development will not result in unreasonable impacts to adjoining properties. And they cite visual blight. They cite noise pollution. They talk about light, odor, and vibration. If it's a planning board's responsibility to make sure that there's no visual blight, we need to develop a way of shielding a 65-foot building. And you do that by either building a sufficient buffer and landscape that buffer well enough so that the adjoining neighbors can't see it, or you move the building further away from the property line so that the sight line is not as noticeable as a wall. And that comment was made when the sidewalk was done, that it's a wall. It's a 65-foot wall that's being built. Again, at the 12/6/16 meeting, again, it was mentioned that the most important thing to the neighbors are the buffers. It's good to say that you have a 100-foot buffer. And in most cases, if what was being built next door was a residential project, that 100-foot buffer would be fantastic. But it's not. It's a 65-foot building, what, approximately 200 feet wide, and there's two of them? I already mentioned about the applicant offering to plant 3 6 to 8 foot trees on abutting property. It doesn't work. It doesn't make any difference. When you look at what is available for parking, when you look at the apartments, I think it has to be pointed out that the previous project, or the project that's being considered at this time, I don't think it's been approved. The one over there, Executive Drive, requires more parking spots than this project does.
Mm-hmm.
If there's rules as to how many parking spots are required, why does this project have fewer per apartment, whether they're shared or not? Why does this have fewer parking spots than what's being built 2 miles down the street, 1.5 miles down the road? Shouldn't they be consistent? Why is one person required to have more parking than this project? Because there's no room? If there's no room, there's too many things being built on that site. The rules are very clear. The town talks about how many bedrooms, how many parking spots per bedroom. They talk about a little, a 0.5 extra spot for the 192 parking lots. You come up with 426 parking spots are required per the town requirements. Simple mathematics. When you look at what is being cited for shared parking, they're sharing 317 spots. Where do the other 100 people park their car? Look at the table on what they've allocated for parking spots in the shared parking lot, in the shared space. Compare it to what the town requirement is, and they're almost 100 spots short. They did pretty well on the office space. They were just about where they should be. They were pretty, I couldn't do the restaurant because I didn't know what the seating arrangements were. The retail, they need 112 spots for retail. In their shared parking list, they allocate 87. Are we changing our rules and regulations to comply with a shared parking spot, which is going to be less than what this town requirement states that you need? They've added up the numbers across in each of the categories, and they came up with the total number. But if you look at each of the categories, in each one, it's less than what the town requires for parking. So you can't go by their shared numbers. Their shared numbers are defective. They're inaccurate. They're incorrect. They did pretty good on the event center. They actually had 25 more parking spots there. They did. They were too short on the 120-room hotel, but close enough. When you look at their numbers, they're currently 85 parking spots short. If you're going to have shared parking, then you then have to take the next step and make a determination and regulation as to when does the restaurant open. If you look at what they're using for numbers, their busy time for the restaurant is noontime and evening. Are we going to prevent IHOP from moving in? Are we going to require that the coffee shop, where people are going to go and get their coffee, that we're saying, well, you know, this is going to work out well, we don't have to go to Dunkin' Donuts, we go to the coffee shop? They haven't made any provisions for the parking for that. So you're going to have to regulate what businesses are open. You're going to have to regulate what type of activities take place in the event center. Take a look on a Saturday how many people are expecting at the event center. Very, very few. They're all going to be there during the week. So we can't have something like a quilting show. We can't have something like a reptile show, anything like that at all, because there's not sufficient parking. If that's going to be the case, then that has to be addressed and has to be regulated. If I understood the conversation earlier about the parking, building A has I'll make this a little shorter. Each of these parking spots for each of the residential units, again, there's insufficient parking for the number of cars. A two-bedroom apartment requires 72 times 2 times 1.25. A two-bedroom apartment requires more than 2 spaces, and there aren't any. The one-bedroom apartments require more than 1 space, and there aren't any. You're going to have people driving around looking for a shared parking spot that's being occupied by a restaurant, being occupied by retail, whatever, without us taking the time to understand that this system isn't going to work. And my last comment, I've mentioned the tax returns, I mentioned the phases. The last comment that I wanted to make was that, and we're back to shared parking lots. I don't even know how you're going to calculate this. But the plan is 25 to 30 spots short for handicapped vehicles. If you look at the regulations on how many spaces per parking spot need to be allocated for handicapped people, they're 25 to 30 short. When I drive up there, I will not have a place to park because there isn't any more handicap parking. That's, by law, has to be there. I respectfully request this board to look at the plan, understand that, yeah, he can build any height building that he wants to build, but he has to provide the parking for it. Please do the calculations. You'll see that my numbers are not wrong. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mills. Are there other abutters or citizens who wish to weigh in? Going once, going twice? All right, we'll close the public hearing and invite the applicant back up. Need an adjustment? Got a little shorter? I think you were in that chair last time, that's why it was different. Ed, respond as you will to the comments that you heard from the members of the public.
Okay. I guess sort of taking them in order. Thank you. Taking them in order that I heard them. The tree height that we're proposing in the landscaping on our property is a mixture of 6 to 8 feet for the evergreens and 2, do I have to do this, maybe? Okay, all right. Mixture of 6 to 8 feet and 8 to 10 feet, approximately 60% 8 to 10 feet along the along the edge. Ms. Burns is correct. The gravel wetland that is there, while it's not owned by the town, it's owned by the development and was installed by the development as part of the overall drainage system for the site. It does take drainage from the Sergeant Acres neighborhood, and the purpose of it was to treat that stormwater that comes off of that neighborhood, the existing stormwater flow, and to clean it up before it gets discharged into the overall drainage system for the town. So that's not being modified. The fence around it will remain in place. There's no grading that is going to take place. We are planning on planting trees along the northerly edge of that to provide some additional buffer to the neighbors. The other thing that we had made a commitment on was to provide the neighbors on Spruce Street, and I just wanted to be specific about what I'm talking about. That is 1 Spruce Street, 3, 5, 7, 9, and 11 Spruce Street, to provide up to 3 8 to 10 foot evergreen trees to be placed, once construction is underway and they understand where those trees might do the best for their particular needs. It's in addition to the plantings that are proposed on our property, and they can either go at the back end of the either on our property in the buffer or on their property in their yard at their choice. But it's simply something that the developer is offering up as an option. It's not required, but we thought it would be something additional to provide protection to the abutters.
Thank you.
With respect to parking for the different buildings, I mean, part of the reason that these 19 spaces are important to the developer is that they serve ultimately the entirety of the residential buildings, the 3 residential buildings. So they're part of the 192 that we wanted to provide in very close proximity to those buildings. Ms. Burns was absolutely correct that there is a less building adjacent to Building C, but that's because we didn't want to put anything between the emergency access road and that, because we're not using the emergency access road for access. We're using it for emergency access only. So we are tight on parking in this area, and that's exactly why these 19 spaces are so important. I would suggest to you that and reiterate that Mr. Monahan is perfectly willing to undertake a discussion with the town as to whether we can either purchase or acquire an easement on this triangle of land that is owned by the town for use for parking. If we can move this parking over to this section of the site and gain adequate permission to do that, we will do that. That being said, that's one of the good things about Building A being one of the last buildings that we're proposing to build, because it gives us some time to do that. I would suggest to you that we are seeking approval for this plan with a commitment to pursue a different option. If that becomes available, we will implement it. But the holding up the development for that, what I anticipate to be a rather lengthy process of discussion with the town council and others, I think is unfair to the developer in that we are compliant with the regulations. I think, in discussing buffers, I've said it before and I will say it again. The comparison between this site development and its impacts on the neighbors is not, or shouldn't be, nothing and this project. It should be what might otherwise be allowed, which is a 65-foot tall office building 200 feet from the property line. So, I mean, I would argue that the impacts from this project are very little. There's very little difference between this and what would otherwise be allowed under the I-2 zoning. So I just put that out there for your consideration. And then finally, with respect to the shared parking analysis that Mr. Mills indicated, the basis for that analysis is a series of intensive or extensive surveys that were done by the Urban Land Institute, and I believe they participated with ITE in that analysis as well. And they actually went out and looked at a variety of mixed-use projects and determined what the actual parking demand was. In your regulations, as in any regulations of any town, there are standards that, typically it's something like 2 parking spaces per dwelling unit. It is between 4 and 5 spaces per 1,000 square feet of retail space. It might be 1 per 3 seats for restaurants. It may be 1 per 250 square feet for office use. All of those are, frankly, a bit overstated, as I think we've found through practice. So not only are we proposing to share parking, in other words, use parking for multiple uses during the day, where you have residences using typically a space at night that perhaps an office user might use during the day, or a retailer might use in the afternoon and early evening. The world is sort of full of retail developments, for example, that have used that 5 space per standard, per 5 space per 1,000 standard, with largely empty parking lots. So the intent here is to build ample parking for the uses that is substantiated by survey and experience going back 30 years, I might add, and not to overbuild impervious area, and build enough. So, and again, when phase 2 comes along, we can have the pleasure of this discussion all over again. So I think that's it. We would respectfully request that the board consider granting a conditional approval based on the conditions outlined in Mr. Thompson's memo.
Thank you for the presentation and the responses, Gordon. Are there other comments or questions by the board? Tom?
Gordon, before you go, can you comment on the handicap parking availability?
The handicap parking, we have looked at that, and it's sufficient according to the standards in your.
I can add to that.
Okay. Here, why don't you sit there?
The handicap parking requirements from ADA for a parking lot of 501 to 1,000 spaces is 2% of the parking spaces provided, and we're providing 889 spaces at 2% would require 18 spaces, and we've got 19 throughout the site. So.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Other members of the board have comments or questions? Nelson? No?
Well, I'll just, Mr. Chairman, I'll just say that I'm sympathetic to the applicant's request, and I'm willing to go along with a conditional use permit on this site at this time. I think we've covered the major issues. The no salt, I think we need to talk about. I think I'd agree with no salt on the site. And I'd agree with the Well, I didn't ask about the wells. Gordon talked about the wells being there, and I don't know, who is somebody testing those wells now, or?
They have been tested on, I believe, a semi-annual basis.
By whom, please?
By Merrimack Premium Outlets.
Oh, okay.
And that has been occurring. I mean,
Okay.
I think that one of the things that Mr. Minor mentioned in his communication with us was that there was a desire to have easements granted to the town for access to those wells so that you could do the testing once the agreement wears out. I mean, I want to say that the requirement was for 5 years after construction. So I just received a monitoring report, I think in December, and that might be the last one that MPO is required to do. We'll do periodic testing during construction, and at the board's request, we can do it, sort of semi-annually after construction for some period of time. I mean, but only for the 4 wells that are on our property, because that's where we're going to.
We talked about last time trying to figure out what was required at MPO and whether it's still in effect or expired and all that. Robert, did you?
I apologize. I haven't seen that.
I posed the question to MVD, and they have not replied yet. I talked to Ron yesterday when we met with the previous applicant, and he said the answer is forthcoming, but he doesn't have an answer yet.
Okay.
I mean, this is only my recollection, but I believe that it was monthly during construction, and then semi-annually for a period of time after construction, and I want to say that it was 5 years.
I have no recollection of that at all, of one or the other at the outlet mall, but I was only at the tail end of that.
And there was also there was a groundwater management plan monitoring plan that was put together. Obviously, the impacts of the blasting up on top of the hill were far more extensive than anything that we're proposing to do. That being said, we are closer to the wells that are important to everybody in the town. So it was monthly during construction. Then if there was an exceedance found, then it was weekly. And there was a period of time where we had some nitrate contamination that they had a blast that went awry. And there was a period of time where they had some weekly monitoring going on. That kind of stabilized itself, and the levels have gone, back down to normal levels. So, we worked with DES and the town MVD and their consultant to make sure that we were doing everything that we needed to do.
So with your construction, you're comfortable taking over that testing plan whenever it expires from the outlet mall and continuing it for some period of time that we should discuss right now?
For the wells on this site, not for the
wells.
18 wells that are all over creation.
Okay. So for these 4 wells on the site, what's the planning board's view as to a testing plan for that? Is one necessary, and if so, for what period of time?
Well, I would have thought we go for the same principle. While during construction, we do it monthly, and once construction's finished, and I think by that I mean all construction is finished, then I would think the half a yearly thing would work very well. And I think possibly 5 years would be excessive. I would have thought we probably could stop at 2 or 3.
So I don't disagree with most of that. I think that the one thing to consider, or at least have a discussion about, I may be wrong about, it seemed to me the thing that was you were searching out when you were testing at MPO was the results of blasting, the contamination caused by blasting.
There were a whole range of analytes, but you're right. There's no reason to test for perchlorates because perchlorates are prohibited in the blasting materials, but there was nitrates and chloride and also a number of volatile organic compounds that might be derivatives of fuel oil or diesel, because that's where the concern was.
Yep. And so given there's a huge difference in the amount of blasting, if there will be any blasting in this, does that warrant some kind of modification in what you think about for a testing plan? I don't know. I mean, I don't want to lose any sleep over it. Nelson, what do you think?
Well, I would think it could be downgraded from that monthly, what did you say, monthly earlier?
I would like it monthly during construction, thereafter semi-annually, as was happened up at the outlet mall. But I just don't think that the semi-annual thing should have to go for such a long period. I would have thought, if given that the blasting is going to be over much minor, I would stop at 2-3 years.
3 years then. I would just think that you talk about during construction, obviously during earthwork and that sort of thing, but if when you come to building A, for instance, you know, when everything else is done, you're finally doing building A, I don't know that you'd have impacts to the groundwater from a construction like that, given that the rest of the paving was in place and that sort of thing. I don't know.
I wish, Mr. Chairman, I don't know the answer to that. I mean, if our colleague Michael was here, maybe we would have a better answer on that. I was just snatching something out of the air because I was just trying to satisfy myself.
What I could suggest is
please.
that we ask MVD what they would like. I mean,
I think that's an excellent suggestion. Let us accept something from Ron Minor.
I'd be okay with that. Yeah.
Maybe modify that a little bit. Why don't we say, or at least maybe make a suggestion.
Just assuming that he's a reasonable man. But.
Well, they may well be. Why don't we say set up some schedule, whether it's every 6 months after construction for 2 years, I don't know what, during construction, and then if MVD thinks it ought to be more, then it would be more.
Why don't we do this? Why don't we say? Monthly during active construction,
I'd be happy
earthwork.
with it. Yes,
and then maybe quarterly until the end of construction, and semi-annually for 2 years after construction ceases. I mean, it's not free to do. It's not free to do this.
No, I agree.
I know it's costly. It costs you money. I appreciate that.
So, but keeping the 4 wells
active
definitely helps. And we've got a good. We don't have to do the baseline because we have a really outstanding baseline.
Yes.
I think so. Yeah.
Do you? Is there any need to change the analytes to? Are the things that are in the old tests that just aren't worth chasing our tail on, or are they all?
I don't know the answer to that, Mr. Chairman. I mean, I would defer to the geotechnical people and the. I mean, it seems to me that what you would be concerned about would be those things. It would be phosphorus, nitrogen,
chlorine,
and of course
chloride.
The chlorides, yeah,
and VOCs. And the VOCs are a fairly standard panel. I mean, we don't have to test for. God knows, hopefully we don't have any PFOA, but, I'd rather not open up that can of worms.
Yeah, really.
Okay. So monthly during earthwork type construction, quarterly during all other construction, semi-annually for 2 years after you're done.
Correct.
Robert, you got the details of that for a condition? In terms of some of the outstanding comments, you submitted a blasting plan. I would suggest that if it's the board's will to consider final approval tonight, that be subject to approval of the fire department, and if they want it changed, you do whatever they say.
Yep.
I think with respect to the roundabout, since CLD's review is still pending, that if they've got comments that require some changes, comply with whatever those are. Are there other things?
There may be other comments forthcoming from CLD, which we're happy to address. I mean, we haven't seen anything, really scary from them to date, so I assume that they are just doing the final review of the plans that have been submitted.
The other things that we've discussed here tonight, just to make sure that they're caught in the conditions, is that the phasing plan that you showed us will make it into the plan set with parking delineated in it.
With the perimeter of the site included with
B.
Phase 1B.
Yeah, 1B. If there's a modification to MPO because this roundabout's on their site, obviously you don't need that
That's
as a
in Robert's
condition.
that's actually in Tim's memo that they would need to get cross easements approved.
Well,
not
there are
just
cross easements in place, but there's a procedural issue in that the roadway that is the current Premium Outlets Boulevard
Yeah.
is part of their site plan.
And it's not on your site, so yeah,
Right.
exactly that.
Yeah.
But that doesn't necessarily need to be a condition. I think the law already lays out that requirement, so.
And we've agreed to strike item 8D of Tim's memo, which is the one about the pedestrian crossing.
Pedestrian crossing is stricken.
That's 8B.
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 Yeah.
That's 8D, and modified 7D, that we want no salt.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, MCC recommends parking surfaces and pedestrian ways, or just the site be treated with sand only, and just kind
Yeah.
of scratch everything else.
Yeah.
Well, MCC actually didn't make that recommendation. We are.
Oh, okay. Well, we'll reword it to say the site shall be treated with sand only and nothing else.
The whole site.
Right.
I think that it's hard to put this as a condition because it's hard to tell whether it's satisfied, but somehow in the approval letter, the applicants made a commitment to work with the town on the triangular piece to see if they could redo their parking.
In that case, I took a stab at it. I'm sure Tim will hack it up tomorrow when he sees it, but I kind of got something to the effect of applicant agrees to and shall pursue easement or purchase of the town-owned parcel to the west of Building A. Should the ability to utilize or acquire this parcel be realized, applicant agrees to relocate the 19 parking spaces located northerly of Building A to that area. Should the ability to utilize or acquire that parcel not be realized, then the subject spaces shall remain where proposed.
And just to clarify, we won't relocate the emergency drive until we've resolved whether that's possible or not. So,
Right,
you know,
that's the
that section of emergency drive that is toward the westerly portion, we can tie into the existing somewhere around the end of the where the gravel wetland is now, and you know, sort of build that with the first phase, and then build the other part of it later.
That's a good solution.
Yeah, that's the solution
Thank
we
you.
wanted, yeah.
And you understand that, right? So we can incorporate that into the phasing plan.
So the things that you started off with tonight that you were easy, like changing the lights and all of that, those are not yet on a plan.
They
nor
actually
the
are on a
condition.
plan. They weren't on one of the plans that I showed you.
It's on the latest.
But they have been submitted.
So I want to make sure that we do whatever we would need to do to make sure we're capturing that in a motion, that the plans to be submitted are going to have the lights reduced along the access road as described by the applicant. The additional plantings that were discussed tonight.
The dumpster relocation or elimination.
Yeah. What else was on the list of things that you said?
Preservation of the existing monitoring wells, and I guess I would say a treatment on the easterly end of the emergency access driveway to discourage motorists from entering.
Okay. That's fine.
Yeah.
One of the things that I want to mention, and so later tonight we've got to consider the minutes from our last meeting, but they relate to this, and I'm quoted as saying, I encourage the use of drought-resistant, low-impact plants, which I did, and the observation of town no-water days. That sentence reads as if I'm encouraging that last bit.
Encouraging no water days?
No water days.
I'm not encouraging that you'll comply with the requirements as everybody else does.
That's right.
Not that it's optional or I'm encouraging you to comply. Any other conditions that we need to record tonight?
On 7C, you talked about Gordon talked about the change of using the only native plants to non-invasive. Did you make that change there? All right. And also, there was discussion about the markings on approaching the roundabout and how I believe they need to be they come out of the standards books that they need to comply with. So Tim's got a condition about changing those, but if I'm hearing them correctly, those markings actually need to be there. So,
well, I guess what we will have, that's related to the CLD review of
Yes.
the roundabout. So, I mean, I guess I would like to have the professionals having that conversation and.
Understood. If there's options between painted on the pavement and painted on the signs really do make a much clearer presentation of where I go.
I think we're doing both.
Than that.
Yeah.
We're proposing both, Mr. Chairman, so.
so are you comfortable with the language that Tim's got down here then?
What number is that?
This is on page 4. It's F halfway down.
Yeah, I mean, I would suggest striking that and just saying something about, we're CLD, we'll comply with CLD's comments.
I like that.
Okay. Are there any waivers required for this application that we haven't considered, Robert?
Didn't we? Oh, no, that was a previous project.
Previous project?
I believe that they were all dealt with during the CUP
before.
process.
Dot all the i's and cross all the t's. Is there anything left of this that the board wishes to discuss with the applicant or consider here tonight? Any of the comments from any of the abutters that anybody wants to make sure they weigh in on or incorporate into the solution for the applicant? My comment is I think that the applicant's done a number of things that exceed what's required of them in this with the plantings that they've offered either in or near the neighbors' yards, additional plantings in the buffer, reducing the lights, not having balconies on the residential buildings facing the Spruce Street, normal things that we would always require in terms of downward shielding any lights on that facade of the building. To try to minimize it and minimize its requirements. I think ultimately there is, I don't know what adjective to use it to use to describe it, but the miscommunication about the road being moved and not being moved and all of that was frustrating. But I do understand at the end of the day, you're still preserving the maximum amount of buffer you're required and then some. And so, although I don't like that the road's being moved, I don't know what I can do about it.
I think we've done what we can about it, and the applicant has offered a potential solution. And,
I hope that solution works out.
And to clarify that a bit more, the entirety of the road is not being moved 40 feet to the north.
Right.
It's only the last
little bump out.
200, 300 feet of the road is being moved 40 feet to the north. So
it's the stuff west of the detention pond.
West of the yes, that's right. And so it starts at nothing, and then goes to 40 feet at the end. So, or 200 feet from the end. So, for what it's worth.
I'm good.
With all of that in mind, is the board prepared to take final action on this tonight? That usually someone says, "I move."
Mr. Chairman, I move we approve the plan as submitted with all of the comments and questions that Robert has written down here as conditions of this approval.
Is there a second for Nelson's motion? Second by Lynn. Any further discussion?
Mr. Chairman, I regret I will not be able to support this because I cannot yet believe, until I've seen what CLD say about the access drive, with great respect to everybody, say I'm not happy with the arrival, entry, whatever you like to call it, and I'm going to, and I'm not going to vote against, but I'm just going to abstain because I think, and I cannot support this until I see what other people say about the traffic situation. I'm not happy with it. I don't think it's right. And let's face it, I haven't been happy with the whole traffic situation because I've never liked what we did at the bottom end of Premium Outlets Drive. So I'm going to abstain.
Any other discussion? If there's no other discussion, all in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Opposed.
One opposed? Any abstaining? One abstaining. So Dan Ricker is opposed, Alistair Mills is abstaining, and it is 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 1 for approval. So, thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. That brings us to item 5 on our agenda, which is discussion and possible action regarding other items of concern. The only one that I have in mind is the recent emails that were distributed to invite members to attend the OEP planning conference, which is, Nelson, you always know the date of this, May 5th?
No, it's
6th?
April.
It's April 28th.
April 28th.
28th.
Yeah.
April 28th. For new members of the board, this is something that the town will pay for, and you can go and select whichever courses that you think are interesting and also meet some other people from other boards. You don't have to go, obviously, but I think it's a good resource. I just want to make sure everybody knew about it. Does anyone else have other items of discussion or concern?
The questionnaire,
Nelson.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
I think it was distributed here this evening. This was a draft of a questionnaire that was put together by myself and staff and the Nashua Regional Planning Commission to be the questionnaire that would accompany our map and so on of the Route 3 sidewalk area, which will be at each of the polling places, which we want to hand out at each of the polling places, and hopefully have people be able to check them off and fill them in and take a survey of where people think we'd ought to be putting our efforts. So we wanted the planning board to look at that this evening. If they have any comments, questions, or problems with it, let's hear it. And Lynn, we appreciate the help that you're going to give us to set up at each of these polling places.
Nelson, could I ask one question? And really, actually, it's probably more to Lynn. I thought the problem with St John's Newman is that we couldn't do it indoors.
Well,
Yes, we can.
we got
Spoke with Father Chris.
we got
Told me he
permission.
didn't have a problem with us setting up a table.
In the lobby.
church building, not in the voting room.
Oh, thank you. That's my only question.
That was, I have no control of it, and that was, Tom
Well,
was gonna
then,
check
I
on
was
it.
just questioning it.
Now,
It had
Tom,
been
Tom
covered.
took that as an
I
action.
would make a suggestion.
I'm delighted.
I have seen with others similar efforts, you get a better response at the exit rather than the entrance.
Yeah.
Now, you can do it either way you want.
You're the expert.
Oh,
lady.
you're the expert.
No.
Well, I'm with you.
The exit's outside.
That could be.
No,
Oh,
what
that's-
I think
that's
she
not-
means is when people come in,
Can't be
go
outside.
vote first
Yeah.
and then go and do the survey. Is that what you're meaning?
Yeah, but everybody leaves out the other back door when
Well,
they're done voting.
it depends on how you set it up, but I'm just saying, when people are coming in,
They're focused.
they're on a mission,
Yeah.
and they don't want to be bothered with this. As they're going out, they're much more likely to pick up one of these, or you're much more likely to get them to say, oh, sure, I'll take a look.
But does that mean in the high school? Are we voting in the high school?
No.
I'm going in middle school.
You're
So
at
it's-
middle
Master
school,
Cola, yeah.
J Muse, and St. John Newman.
Okay, so middle school, you come and go out the same door, so that's
Yep.
easy to deal
Yep.
with.
John Newman, you do the same.
And
Not necessarily.
J Muse, you don't. You go out the back door. Now,
As long as you can be in and out of the weather, I just wouldn't want to put people in
just-
the weather.
I'm
Yeah,
just-
but- Okay, if that, we'll have to play it by ear then
Right.
that day and
Figure out
move
where
it
you wanna be.
indoors if,
It's
if
just
that's
a,
the only option, yeah.
just a suggestion that I've seen,
Okay, good, thank you.
but it's up to you guys.
okay, so let's look at these questions and make sure we like them. And there's, I know that at
I-
this
I
time of
did-
night, I'd rather give everybody
I
time
did
to go
look, and I
think.
like them.
I like all the questions,
Yep.
Mr. Chairman. I'm quite happy with them.
Yep.
I think they're good questions.
Yep.
Not too much, just enough to
Yeah,
get
yeah,
people,
you
just
don't
enough
wanna
to get people
overload the
saying yes,
detail.
yay or
Yeah,
nay.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Comments? I'm happy with them, having looked at them now. Okay, so let's keep them. Are we going to have a provision where if someone's too busy to fill this out, they could just take one with them and? mail it or drop it off or whatever? Just have an address on it to mail it?
I could put a postal address you're suggesting?
Well, whatever people would need, if you want them to email it. I mean, not everybody scans
Well, see,
documents, but.
if you have this, people aren't gonna email that back unless
They
they
could.
scan it, they have
could
to scan it,
Yep.
yeah.
But give them the option.
Yeah, well, that's okay, if that's what
Take a
you,
picture with the
that's
phone.
what you mean.
Send you my phone.
It's a pain in the neck.
Just take
I
a
don't
picture
know.
with the phone, and once I'm done filling it out. So anyway, we can add the information so people have that choice. Even if they don't use it, at least we've done what we can to try to reach out.
Yeah,
Okay.
take my name off the bottom and we'll put it on the bottom. Yeah.
I shouldn't do that, Nelson. They might suggest you're going to pay for the postage.
Yeah, we'll take his name off with, okay. So if there's no other discussion on that, one other just comment announcement. March 15th, Matt Wakens is going to come to our Rotary Club meeting and seek some input and discuss these same kinds of things. I know Lynn's already a member and Paul's a member, but anybody that's here, not the public. Yes, the public can come, but not as my guest.
But if you're interested in coming and hearing them.
Yeah, there's a chance to do that. Nelson,
Yeah, well,
Matt
I'm looking
Wakens
forward
from
to that. I
NRPC.
already told him I would
He's,
come.
he's
Yes,
the, yes. He was the guy that came with Sarah Siskevich to
Yeah.
do the presentation that they had here. And he's their senior transportation planner and very nice guy and is willing to come talk about it and gather some input. I don't know whether there will be a whole lot of feedback, but we'll try.
Yeah.
And if anybody wants to come, hey, Rotary's a cool thing.
I'll be there.
Excellent. Anybody else have any other items of
I
concern?
would. I would if you held it at the right time.
I have one question.
Or a different time.
What's your question?
Probably not an accident.
I was just curious. So the 20th, Rob, do we have agenda or no?
Yes, there is something
Is
scheduled.
Synergy on it?
Yeah.
Oh, something came in on the 20th?
No, you continued Synergy to that date.
Oh, okay.
We all forgot that earlier.
I just didn't know if he.
Yeah, we told him.
Have I seen anything from him yet?
I just
No.
was looking at the
But-
meeting, the minute. I don't know why they were on top, but I just noticed it. I was like, oh shoot, he needs to provide something by the 20th, and I just remember Rob saying that we didn't have anything, so I was just checking. So he's the only one on there.
As far as I know, off
Okay.
the top of my head, yeah.
Good catch.
Thanks.
Well, we shouldn't allow
Okay.
that to slip.
No, we were very strict with him.
That man
so
has-
we will
that
have a
man-
meeting on the 20th.
That man has got away with enough delay.
Any other items of concern or discussion? If not, then the approval of the minutes of February 20th are on deck.
I second that.
Lynn moves as
Oh, no,
printed.
you've got a correction.
Well, you can still
I
second it.
I second it.
Okay. My correction was on page 3, lines 6 and 7, which is that section that I read to the applicant. And it should indicate I've encouraged the use of drought-resistant, low-impact plants, and the applicant is required to observe town no water days.
Required. That's a good idea.
I don't know if anybody else had any other comments or questions on these minutes? Nelson?
No, I didn't. I neglected to do my homework.
That's pretty good.
Okay, so other than that one correction, everybody's ready to, for the question?
Yes, we'll move.
All in favor of approving the minutes as amended, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? 6-0-0 to approve the minutes. That brings us to,
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we adjourn.
is there a second?
Second.
Second by Lynn. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? We're adjourned. Thank you all. Don't forget to turn your microphones off, and thank you very much.